Warrior Lore. Chapter 3276. Hiss. Xiaohua slightly inhaled a breath of cold air. Although Fu Jiwen said it very simply, it was also easy to understand. Doesn't the Dao sect have auspicious talismans? Didn't I also get the Phoenix Jade talisman? It seems like I can inexplicably turn misfortunes into blessings many times. Isn't this what Fu Jiwen said about luck? Because luck is very complicated, Confucian cultivators even have specialized cultivators to research this technique. Unfortunately, I am very unfamiliar with this. Actually, most people only heard about it from hearsay. It is impossible for them to know the details. Fu Jiwen said again, moreover, it is said that dragon qi and luck are closely related. On the hidden immortal continent, where there are dragon veins, there will be dragon qi, and where there is dragon qi, the luck will be especially vigorous. Therefore, only people with great luck can resist the dragon qi on the fan of 1,000 miles of mountains and rivers. Hee. Hearing this, Xiaohua laughed. If this is true, then wouldn't the dragon kings of the 4 seas become the rulers of the 3 continents? Wouldn't the dragon palaces of the 4 seas become the place with the most abundant luck in this world? Fellow Xiao is wrong. Dragon qi, dragon veins, and dragon race are not too related. Dragon veins are born from luck. It is just borrowing the dragon shape, and the dragon race themselves do not have luck. Fu Jiwen also said with a smile, if it is as fellow Xiao thinks, the place with the most abundant luck is Dragon Island. That dragon palaces of the 4 seas are only part of Dragon Island, suppressing the 4 seas. Dragon Island is the place where the dragon race resides. Speaking of dragon palaces, Xiaohua asked again, Dragon Island is probably the same as the immortal palaces. No one knows where it is? Yes, that is exactly the case. Fu Jiwen nodded. A trace of longing appeared in his eyes. No matter if it is the immortal palaces, Dragon Island, Great Lightning Tune Temple, or Great Sage Temple, they are all only heard of but not seen. Let's not talk about this anymore. Xiaohua asked. Let's talk about the 10 great imperial equipment. Yes, Fu Jiwen said with a smile. This imperial equipment ranked 7th is a wonderful item. It is called Beauty Jade. Beauty Jade? Xiaohua reached out his hand and scratched his chin a few times. As if he understood, he said with a smile, Young Master Fu means, all male cultivators should like it? Ha ha ha, Fu Jiwen said. It is said to be so. But I'm afraid that only the man who actually obtained the Beauty Jade would know the specific benefits, right? Sweat, this kind of thing can also be called imperial equipment? After Xiaohua seemed to understand, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Fu Jiwen explained again. Since fellow Taoist Xiao has thought of one of the layers, I'm sure you also understand that when this Jade of Beauty is used, it can transform into a frightening heavenly maiden. It's extremely easy for people with unstable mental states to fall into the trap. Lust is the first blade. Xiaohua sighs and says, the power of this color is even heavier than the power of dragons and elephants, and even heavier than our mountains and rivers. No wonder this Jade Beauty is ranked above the fan of mountains and rivers. That's right. There are several times more male cultivators than female cultivators in this world. It's very difficult to escape from this Jade Beauty. What about the 6th-ranked imperial equipment? Xiaohua pursed his lips and smiled. This Xiao is very curious as to which imperial equipment can suppress the Beauty Jade. To be able to suppress the Beauty Jade, it's naturally the words that have existed since time immemorial and run through the past and present. It can turn a woman into a skeleton. Fu Jiwen says with a smile, without words, without sentences, without text, those beauties can only be a lump of meat, a skeleton. After 100 years, who can still remember them? Inscriptions? It should be said that the collection of inscriptions and scrolls is completed. Fu Jiwen nods. This imperial equipment is called the 10,000-word book. According to legend, it was written by the earliest 9,999 inscriptions born in the world in ancient times. When the 10,000-word book is used, every word can reach the stars. Every word can disturb heaven and earth. It can be said that every word is a gem. Every word is heavy. Every word is ancient. Under this 10,000-word book, even if the sage of literature can reach the Milky Way, he will still be suppressed by these words. Not even a trace of noble spirit will leak out. 9,999 inscriptions? Xiao Hua frowned. Why not 10,000? It is said that when the 10,000th inscription was created, heaven and earth changed colors, gods and devils wept, mountains collapsed, and the earth cracked. Thus, the last inscription A was merged with heaven and earth, and no one can see it. Of course, if anyone can see this inscription A, their body will immediately become a sage. Hearing this, Xiao Hua can't help but secretly curl his lips. Isn't this the Soul Cultivator's green seal text? Xiao Hua clearly knows what the inscription A looks like. Xiao Hua is even more clear about the power of the green seal text. In this world, besides the green seal text, how can there be 9,999 inscriptions A with the same power? Isn't this the legendary inscription A? Oh, young Master Fu, please wait a moment. Just as Xiao Hua curls his lips and Fu Jiwen is about to speak, Xiao Hua suddenly waves his hand and says, Fu Jiwen is stunned, but looking at the auction downstairs, he immediately understands. Just as the two are talking, Yu Linfeng has already bid for the blood ink. The one who obtained it is the person who bid for the thunder amplifying wood with Xiao Hua. After the blood ink, he bid for a few more rare items. Now, on the lacquer plate in front of Yu Linfeng is a jade eye. Yu Linfeng is also speaking in a loud voice. Fellow immortals, after bidding for some rare items of the hidden immortal continent, let's take a break for a while. Now, there are a few interesting items. Although they have nothing to do with us Confucian cultivators, if any of you are good at both, you can use a small amount of primeval stones to bid for them. This jade eye in front of me records a Taoist technique called wind and cloud spell. Just as Yu Linfeng says this, an impatient person everywhere interrupts him. A cold voice says, Fellow immortal you, our 3 continents have a law. No one can sell Taoist techniques. What are you doing? Aren't you afraid that Zhai Xinglu will be destroyed by the immortal palace? My Zhai Xinglu has always been enforcing the law. How can we violate the iron law of the 3 continents? Yu Linfeng says with a smile, in order to contain the great enemy of us Confucian cultivators, the immortal palace prohibits the sale of Taoist techniques. However, it is only limited to low-level and basic techniques. As for high-level techniques, they don't really care. As for fellow immortals, there are people with peerless aptitudes. I'm afraid many of you also have Taoist cultivation, right? My Zhai Xinglu's technique is only a technique between the 3 levels of essence energy. It should be a Taoist golden core technique, but it is not prohibited by the immortal palace. Hearing this, Fu Jiwen looks at the star-shaped Xiao Hua and understands something. He knows that Xiao Hua wants to bid for this item. Oh my! A Taoist technique of the 3 levels of essence energy. That voice smacks his lips and says, this thing must cost a lot of primeval stones, right? Not much, not much. 1 top-grade primeval stone. Yu Linfeng waves his hand and says, damn 1. Top-grade primeval stone. That voice seems to want to jump up from below. This is too expensive. How could anyone want it? Yu Linfeng shrugs his shoulders and slightly waves the folding fan in his hand. With a calm appearance, he says, there's no other way. It's a rare item worth hoarding. This is the price. This is a technique. Unlike some imperial tool or scroll, it can be passed down forever. Moreover, in the eyes of fellow immortals, it may be worthless, but in the eyes of others, it may be a priceless treasure. 1 top-grade primeval stone. Without waiting for Yu Linfeng to finish speaking, someone not far away called out a price. Oh? Xiao Hua was greatly surprised. He looked downstairs. Needless to say, this person must have a Taoist cultivation base. Moreover, he must have already reached the peak of foundation establishment, or even the early Jindan stage. Only then would he come to the auction to bid for this Jindan cultivation method. Good. This fellow immortal bids 1 top-grade primeval stone. Yu Linfeng raises his eyebrows and calls out in a slightly exaggerated manner, is there anyone else bidding? Hee. I'm afraid 1 top-grade primeval stone is enough to close the deal. Besides Xiao Hua, Fu Jiwen says with a smile, even fellow Taoist Xiao wouldn't spend a few top-grade primeval stones to compete with a Taoist disciple for this golden core technique, right? Xiao Hua nods indeed. Now that the Taoist sects are in decline, any Taoist cultivator who has some sense of the big picture wouldn't kill each other like this. Sure enough, after this cultivator speaks, although the entire auction is somewhat noisy, no one bids against him. If no one bids, this item will be this fellow immortal's. Yu Linfeng raises his folding fan and is about to drop it. Wait. At this moment, the person on the third floor opposite Xiaohua speaks again. I'll add 10 top-grade primeval stones. Oh? This is... Not only is Xiaohua baffled, even Fu Jiwen raises his eyebrows and looks at the opposite building with some surprise. After all, although the opposite side has only bid twice, the items they bid for each time are completely unrelated to the Taoist sects. One is the Thunder Amplification Wood, the other is the Light Beast Blood Ink. How could they bid again for a golden core technique? Could it be a diversion? This person in front of us is also a Taoist cultivator? Xiaohua seems to understand something. His goal is the same as mine, also a Taoist treasure. If so, just now, I was too impetuous. I thought this person was that Duanmu. That's not right. Just as he thinks up to here, Xiaohua seems to have thought of something again and a trace of a smile hangs at the corner of his mouth. Fuck. Just now from that tone, I can only guess with 30% certainty that that person is young Master Duanmu. But now that this guy opened his mouth to bid for this Taoist sex technique, I'm afraid I'm 70% sure that this person is young Master Duanmu. The person who bid for the Thunder Amplification Wood with me just now is really a Taoist cultivator? Fu Jiwen at the side shifts his gaze from outside and looks at Xiaohua. After all, the Taoist sect's methods are unique and can use this Thunder Amplification Wood in many places. Would a Taoist sect disciple be very familiar with this star-picking tower's manager? Xiaohua smiles faintly. Fu Jiwen, however, says with a smile, fellow Taoist Xiao, I'm not too sure about your cultivation, but I reckon you should be the kind of cultivator who secludes himself from the world and only cultivates Taoist sex techniques, not involving yourself in other things. Fellow Taoist also doesn't know, in this hidden immortal continent, no, it should be the 3 continents. Although many cultivators don't dare to say that they are good at both sects, there are often some Confucian cultivators who have Taoist divine abilities and Buddhist sects who have Confucian cultivators' divine abilities. The person bidding may not be a true Taoist sect cultivator, but he may also have Taoist divine abilities. Even if this kind of person has some connection with Star Picking Tower, it's also normal. -11. Chapter 3277. Xiaohua had already told Fu Jiwen about his situation. Now that he had asked him so many seemingly ordinary things, Fu Jiwen's explanation was also normal. Especially since Fu Jiwen didn't know about his conflict with Duanmu Gongzi. Of course, he didn't think as much as he did. Let's wait and see. Xiaohua didn't explain and only responded. Downstairs, in this short moment, dozens of high-grade primeval stones had already been added. Finally, the cultivator downstairs helplessly withdrew. Clearly, he was somewhat embarrassed. Good. This wind and cloud art will go to this. Yu Linfeng waved his hand. Just as he was about to settle, Xiaohua raised his voice again. 2 top-grade primeval stones. Boom. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire auction was bustling with activity again. Obviously, the first wave of the thunder amplifying wood was caused by Xiaohua and the person opposite him. Now, this inconspicuous jade eyes had successfully provoked a fight between the two. Add 10 high-grade primeval stones. The voice from the opposite side was extremely fast. It was a bit faster than the previous bid with the cultivator downstairs. And this voice, when heard by Xiaohua's ears, actually carried a kind of relaxed, a kind of excitement. It really is this guy. Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed. That's right, since Xiaohua could guess that the person opposite him was Duanmu Gongzi, how could Duanmu Gongzi not guess that it was Xiaohua here? Not to mention that Duanmu Gongzi had already met several distinguished guests on the 3rd floor before entering the balcony, just based on Duanmu Gongzi's words just now. As long as someone paid attention, they would be able to guess that the person on the balcony was Duanmu Gongzi. But Xiaohua still twisted his neck and competed with him. Who else could it be other than Xiaohua? Of course, it couldn't be ruled out that there were other cultivators who urgently needed the thunder-amplifying wood, and thus didn't care about Duanmu Gongzi's face. Therefore, Duanmu Gongzi was the same as Xiao Hua, bidding with the cultivator downstairs in an uncertain situation. The purpose of this bidding wasn't the wind and cloud art, but Xiao Hua's identity. Even the moment Duanmu Gongzi bid for the wind and cloud art, he already denied that Xiao Hua was on the balcony and thought that the cultivator downstairs was Xiao Hua. Of course, in this way, Duanmu Gongzi won the wind and cloud art and ruined Xiao Hua's good thing. So Duanmu Gongzi was also happy. After all, it was only a top-grade primeval stone. Duanmu Gongzi could still afford to waste. Since Xiao Hua understood the reason, why didn't he stand up to fight? There had already been conflicts left and right, so it was one more. Naturally, Xiao Hua's shout had revealed his identity to young Master Duanmu at the same time. How could young Master Duanmu not be excited? 3 top-grade primordial stones. Xiao Hua shouted again without hesitation. Fu Jiwen was greatly alarmed and said anxiously, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, although this cultivation method is rare, but it's really not worth 2 supreme-grade essence stones. Add another 10 upper-grade primordial stones." Young Master Duanmu also opened his mouth. "Forget it." At this moment, Xiao Hua smiled and said loudly, "Just now, this old man took advantage of this fellow immortal. This time, even though this old man really desires this jade eye, in order to make up for the injury I inflicted on fellow immortal, I'll give it to fellow immortal." "You." Right after Xiao Hua finished speaking, a furious roar rose, but it only lasted for a moment before the voice fell silent again. When it spoke again, there was no anger in it. "Then thank you, fellow Taoist." Hearing the word fellow Taoist, Xiao Hua shrugged and said to Fu Jiwen with a smile, "See, you're indeed a fellow Taoist. This Xiao knows his mistake and corrects it. Can this be considered the greatest virtue?" Fu Jiwen naturally couldn't see Xiao Hua's expression, but he stood up apologetically and cupped his hands, saying, "Alas, it's all my fault. I caused fellow Taoist Xiao to become enemies with this person." At this point, what did Fu Jiwen not understand? It's just that he thought it was his own matter that made things difficult for Xiao Hua. It has nothing to do with you. Xiao Hua waved his hand, indicating for Fu Jiwen to stand up. If there's no accident, that person should be young Master Duanmu of the Duanmu family. This Xiao doesn't know his name, but when I entered Star Picking Tower, this Xiao inadvertently had an unnecessary conflict with him. Even if this Xiao ignores him, he'll still remember this Xiao in his heart. There's no harm in letting him spend 3 supreme-grade primordial stones to deepen his impression. "See, Duanmu family." Xiao Hua said it casually, but Fu Jiwen gasped. The Duanmu family was truly a colossus to him. "Ignore him." Xiao Hua waved his hand. He also doesn't know who this Xiao is. "After tonight, we'll go our separate ways." Fu Jiwen looked at Xiao Hua's figure, bit his lips slightly, and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, the Duanmu family isn't an ordinary family. Even if fellow Taoist has the cultivation of 7th-grade essence energy, I'm afraid you won't be able to confront them head-on." "Oh, 7th-grade essence energy?" When Xiao Hua heard this, he unconsciously felt a little bitter in his mouth. 7th-grade essence energy was the cultivation of body integration. Given 1,000 years, who knew if Xiao Hua could cultivate into body integration? However, Fu Jiwen hesitated again and said, "The descendants of the Duanmu family are also divided into direct and side branches, and even partial branches. Not everyone with the surname Duanmu can't be provoked. To be able to participate in this kind of auction in Bronze Pillar Nation, they shouldn't be from the direct branch of the Duanmu family. Fellow Taoist Xiao doesn't need to be too worried. This Xiao understands." Xiao Hua's voice regained its calmness. He already had a plan in his heart. This Duanmu family was like the Imperial Thunder sect, although it was very big, but on the other hand, it also had a lot of disciples. This Duanmu young master's cultivation wasn't very high, but there were probably many disciples like him in the Duanmu family. There might not be any top cultivators who would stand up for some small matter for no reason. "You better tell this Xiao what the 5th Imperial artifact is." "All right." Fu Jiwen saw that Xiao Hua was calm. Although he was a little anxious in his heart, he could only agree and sit down again. He said, "The 5th Imperial artifact is the Divine Devil Chess. Divine Devil Chess? When Xiaohua heard this, he frowned again. This. What chess? How did it become one of the top 10 imperial artifacts? Fellow Taoist isn't the only one who is puzzled. Even I and many other cultivators don't understand. Fu Jiwen said absent-mindedly. It's said that the reason why the Divine Devil Chess became one of the top 10 imperial artifacts is because of the mystery of this Divine Devil Chess. No one has ever seen this Divine Devil Chess, and no one knows the use of this Divine Devil Chess. I have only heard that this Divine Devil Chess is a chess set that uses heaven and earth as the chessboard and gods and devils as the chess pieces. Gods and devils? How is that possible? Xiaohua snorted. He felt that this Confucian student was the best at making up nonsense. Everything that came out of their mouth was impossible. Gods and devils. How could they be chess pieces? If gods and devils were chess pieces, who would be able to control gods and devils? That's right. Fu Jiwen withdrew the trace of worry in his eyes and said with a smile, that's right. However, I have also heard of some legends that are related to this Divine Devil Chess. Xiaohua looked downstairs. The auction had started again. Yu Linfeng actually took out some Dao sect talisman crafting and alchemy techniques to bid. These talisman crafting and alchemy techniques were obviously more popular than golden core cultivation techniques. Many cultivators began to bid. Of course, the price of these secret techniques was far less than the golden core cultivation techniques. Suddenly, Xiaohua's heart moved, and he secretly said, "Damn it, I forgot. I have now reached the peak of golden core stage. Although I still don't have any signs of condensing a nascent soul, and I don't know how to condense a nascent soul, I should prepare these nascent soul pills and nascent soul birth pills. Now in these 3 continents, Dao sects have declined, and it's hard to say if there are any nascent soul cultivators. Where would there be people who can refine nascent soul pills and nascent soul birth pills for them? I'm afraid I have to refine them myself. It's said that only pills refined by pill masters who surpass nascent soul can truly form a nascent soul. However, in terms of cultivation and comprehension of heavenly Tao, my green-robed primordial spirit may not be inferior to a nascent soul cultivator. I wonder if the nascent soul birth pills and nascent soul birth pills he refined are useful? No matter what, I don't have the pill formulas here, and I have to find the pill formulas of these pills in these 3 continents. Alas, it's really difficult. Hee, young Master Fu. Xiaohua's ears perked up, waiting for Yu Linfeng to finish refining the pill formulas. At the same time, he said to Fu Jiwen, quickly tell me about the legend. Fu Jiwen cleared his throat and said with a smile, this legend is different from misty like immortal robe. According to legend, tens of thousands of years ago, there was a flourishing empire on this hidden immortal continent called Dongchen. This Dongchen empire's territory was vast, and it occupied most of Qing province and Su province among the 9 provinces of hidden immortal continent. It was more than 10 times bigger than the second-ranked country. Moreover, this Dongchen empire's several generations of kings were extremely wise. Under their political and military skills, this Dongchen empire's people were rich, and the country was prosperous, attracting tens of thousands of countries. However, in the end, an extremely ambitious monarch appeared in the Dongchen Empire. He wanted to be the ruler of the entire hidden immortal continent, so he began to develop his military force and frantically expanded. At the beginning, the Dongchen Empire's expansion was very smooth, and it once reached 3 provinces. However, when the Dongchen Empire attacked a nameless small country in Yin province, they encountered an unprecedented resistance. Many of the Dongchen Empire's famous generals died in this small country. In the end, the king was enraged and personally led the army to attack. This king was said to have a cultivation of 5th grade essence force, and he had countless generals under his command. All of them were 3rd or 4th grade essence force cultivators. Under the king's frantic attack, that small country was forced to retreat and finally reached the end of the line. Just when the Dongchen Empire's king thought that victory was in his hands, he heard a series of earth-shattering roars from thousands of miles away. The originally clear sky was instantly covered with dark clouds, and the entire ground was also covered with black flames. In this drastic change in the sky, a huge chessboard appeared. On the left and right of the chessboard, there were 6 godly generals and 6 demon generals. Each of them had their own responsibilities, and they charged out from the chessboard. Within thousands of miles, all living things were slaughtered by these 12 godly demons. Although the king urgently mobilized all the generals to fight back, how could they be a match for the godly demons? In just half a day's time, Dongchen Empire's 100,000 elite soldiers were all crushed into meat paste. Not a single one of them could escape alive. The most frightening thing was that the nameless small country also had no survivors. Within thousands of miles, all living things were plunged into misery and suffering. Vengeful spirits wandered around freely, and even the demon generals who were born with ghosts could not devour the millions of living things in time. -11. Chapter 3278. After all the living beings were massacred, wind and thunder raged between heaven and earth. Torrential rain poured down, and everything within 10,000 miles became a swamp. However, within this swamp, corpses lay everywhere, and blood flowed everywhere. The stench of blood did not dissipate even after 100 years, and no one could survive in this place. Fu Jiwen spoke eloquently. As for the celestial fiend chest that caused such a calamity, it disappeared without a trace. Where it went, or which expert triggered the celestial fiend chest, no one knows until now. Of course, from this legend, I feel that this celestial fiend chest is a great killing machine. Its activation requires the sacrifice of tens of thousands or even hundreds of millions of living beings. Unless it's a matter of life and death, no one would easily take it out. That's why it's so mysterious. My goodness, Xiaohua sighed. Such a great killing machine. I'm afraid it's ranked first among the 10 great imperial artifacts, right? Why is it only ranked 5th? Fu Jiwen shook his head. This celestial fiend chest is too bloody. Confucian cultivators would never place it first. Actually, Xiaohua laughed again. This legend is too exaggerated, to the point that I feel that it's all made up. Look at that so-called Dongchen Empire. They're crazy and exaggerated. Do those Confucian aristocratic families not care? Although Duanmu aristocratic family is a first-class Confucian aristocratic family, it's not difficult for them to reach out and take care of this matter, right? Secondly, that monarch was actually able to cultivate to the 4th grade of origin power. How long is his lifespan? He's probably tired of being the monarch, right? Thirdly, so many famous generals have fallen in this nameless small country, that monarch. How could he personally go into battle? Furthermore, life is the most important thing. Fourthly, since Dongchen Empire is so powerful, it must have 10 great imperial artifacts, right? Can't the ones ranked first suppress the celestial fiend chess? Haha. Fu Jiwen laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao, don't nitpick too much. This is just a legend. Who knows if it's true? However, there's one thing that's true. Oh? It's that 10,000 miles of blood pool, Fu Jiwen said. Today, that blood pool is still uninhabitable, and it's still abnormally bloody. Even birds can't fly over that blood pool. Back then, I even made a trip there. Is that so? Xiaohua asked curiously. That place is in Yin province? Yes, it's celestial fiend blood pool. If there is a chance, this Xiao will personally go and take a look. It was very strange. When Xiaohua heard this very unfamiliar name, a trace of feeling suddenly appeared in his heart. This feeling was indescribable, as if it was a kind of summoning. Oh, that's right. As soon as Xiaohua felt this, he immediately asked, the God and Devil blood pool is the place where the God and Devil chest disappeared. Could it be that no one went there to see it? Xiao Xiao, 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 Confucian, Xiao, Xiao, Xiaohua, Confucian, Yin, Xiao, Yin, Confucian, Confucian, Taoist and in cult of cultivators, fiends, Yin, 1,000 years, and Confucian, Xiao, Confucian and Anan years. Xiao Xiao Xiao, Xiao, Yate. Xiao Xiao, 8 Yin. Xiao, how dare you? You're going against your ancestors. Just as Xiaohua sighed and wanted to listen to the stories of the other 10 great imperial equipment s, He heard a few angry curses that sounded like rolling thunder coming from downstairs, instantly attracting Xiao Hua and Fujiwen's attention. The two of them thought to themselves at the same time, what's going on? At this auction, Yu Linfeng had a row of 4 scrolls open in front of him. These scrolls were all rolled up together and tied together with purple threads. In front of him, the so-called rotten scholars that Xiao Hua had just seen walked out of the crowd. They stood under these scrolls and scolded, "Yu Linfeng, you are also a disciple of us Confucian cultivators. Your star-plucking tower is also a branch of us Confucian cultivators. How can you be so blinded by primeval stones? The so-called imperial artifacts, the so-called spiritual herbs, the so-called blood ink, you can just bid. Those are only used for cultivation, defense, and attack. But although the calligraphy and paintings of the great scholars of the early years contain an unparalleled noble spirit, they themselves represent the academic achievements of these great scholars. They are the crystallization of their lifetime's knowledge, and can't be compared to those earthly imperial artifacts and scrolls. You're bidding for the painstaking efforts of these great scholars in public. Isn't that a disgrace to culture? Isn't that a disgrace to your ancestors? Although Yu Linfeng's expression was somewhat awkward, he still carefully cupped his hands and said, "Seniors, although these scrolls are the writings of great scholars, they're still scrolls. Our star-picking tower can't just keep these sacred objects in our tower, can we? We have to let these great scholars' knowledge be admired by the younger generation, right? Perhaps our star-picking tower's method is a bit wrong, a bit vulgar, and can't enter your eyes, but it's still our star-picking tower's way of commemorating and valuing these great scholars, right?" Bullshit. An old man with a bald head and a few strands of white hair under his chin raised his walking stick and swung it at Yu Linfeng in midair. He scolded, "I'll beat you to death, you unfilial junior." The calligraphy and paintings of great scholars are elegant objects that can only be admired in a quiet room. Once these elegant objects are here, they're stained with the stench of money. Inside, the noble spirit that all of you are drooling over is also somewhat inferior. Although these calligraphy and paintings have an incomparably pure noble spirit, these are the condensation of the great scholar's essence, qi, and spirit. They're not used for ordinary attacks. Another old man raised his trembling arm and said, "You little bastard, your words are even better than singing. Who doesn't know that you're using these calligraphy and paintings as scrolls, using the essence, qi, and spirit of these great scholars to fight for you? When the essence, qi, and spirit of these calligraphy and paintings are gone, these calligraphy and paintings will become trash. AI, what a wastrel." Ha ha ha. Upstairs, Xiao Hua laughed, thinking, "Isn't this the rotten scholar that Xiaoyi mentioned just now, who's here to cause trouble? They treat the scrolls of those great scholars as their heirlooms and don't allow Zhai Xinglu to bid for them. But is this possible?" "Sure enough," Yu Linfeng said loudly, "Seniors, if you feel that these calligraphy and paintings are the painstaking efforts of great scholars and can only be admired in a quiet room, then why don't you bid for these calligraphy and paintings? If they're in your hands, won't my Zhai Xinglu be more at ease? Your Zhai Xinglu is blinded by greed. Don't tell me the base price of these calligraphy and paintings are in supreme-grade primordial stones. How can a few poor old men like us afford to bid for them?" A few rotten scholars said angrily. Hearing this, Fujiwen also understood. He sighed and said, "What these seniors said is right. The ancient great scholars' handwriting is getting fewer and fewer. I don't know when these will all disappear. Calligraphy and paintings without essence, qi, and spirit are simply dead objects. It's impossible to show the style of the great scholars of various sects." Xiaohua just stood there and spoke without pain. He waved his hand with a smile. "If the old doesn't go, the new won't come. Without these ancient great scholars, aren't there still the great scholars of today? There are more and more great scholars in each generation. What's so great about that?" "Haha," Fujiwen smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Xiao may not know, but the so-called great scholars are also called great scholars. They're not purely from cultivation. They're those who read books and poems, have noble moral character, and are knowledgeable scholars. Those who can be called great scholars, or great scholars, are those who opened a school of thought and have a place in the debate of the 100 schools of thought. How can it be so easy for the later generations to give birth to them? So that's how it is. Xiao Hua's face unconsciously changed, and he was filled with respect. He already understood that this so-called great scholar was not a kind of realm as he thought, but a kind of honor, a kind of title. If he forced himself to compare with the people of the Tao sect, then the founder of the Imperial Thunder sect, Taoist Master Qianyun, was probably this kind of person. Then, the debate of the 100 schools of thought. Xiao Hua just said half of this sentence, but he swallowed it back down. He didn't even seem to understand the 10 great imperial artifacts. Now he actually wanted to ask about the debate of the 100 schools of thought. He was afraid that if he let Fu Jiwen ask them one by one, he wouldn't be able to finish all of them tonight. Let's wait and slowly ask in the future. Xiao Hua didn't ask anymore, but at the auction, those rotten scholars became even more aggressive. They practically jumped up and cursed Zhai Xing Lu's evil deeds. From the calligraphy and paintings of the great scholars to the cultivation methods of the Confucian school, and even the imperial artifacts of the Confucian school, they all became Zhai Xing Lu's crimes of forgetting their ancestors and betraying their ancestors. No matter how Yu Linfeng explained, he was not allowed to bid on these great scholars' calligraphy and paintings. Xiao Hua was a bit bored and was just about to ask about the 10 great imperial artifacts when he suddenly became vigilant. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Xiao Yi, what's the matter?" Reporting to Senior, someone sent a visiting card and wants to come and pay a visit to Senior. Xiao Yi's voice came from outside. Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he said with a smile, "Come in first." "Yes, Senior." As Xiao Yi spoke, she walked in with a golden visiting card. Just as she was about to respectfully hand it over, Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Don't be anxious. This old man is just asking, is the owner of this visiting card an honored guest on the 3rd floor?" "Yes, Senior." Xiao Yi nodded and said, "Any honored guest on the 3rd floor of the Bright Moon Palace can pay a visit to each other if they don't want to hide their identity." Just now, this servant not only saw several attendants of the honored guest carrying visiting cards to other pavilions, but also saw 2 honored guests enter other rooms. "Who sent this visiting card? Do you know?" Xiao Hua asked again. Xiao Yi shook her head. "This servant doesn't know. The one who sent the visiting card was also Xiao Yi, not that Senior's attendant. And, since that's the case, this old man doesn't need to look at this visiting card." Xiao Hua said with a flick of his sleeve, "Tell that Xiao Yi exactly what I said." Xiao Yi's expression changed slightly again, and she begged in a low voice, "Senior, you don't need to make things so stiff. Even if you don't want to see that person, you only need to say that you don't want to see him. There's no need to return the visiting card. This kind of face-slapping matter. Senior should consider it more carefully." Chapter 3279. So it's like this. Xiao Hua had always believed in the advice of others. He thought for a moment and said, "Then put down the visiting card. You tell Xiao Yi that this old man has a guest here, and it's not convenient for me to see him." Xiao Yi's face lit up with joy. She smiled sweetly at Xiao Hua and placed the visiting card on the desk before hurrying out. Fu Jiwen really wanted to know who the guest was. However, this was clearly Xiao Hua's private matter. Since Xiao Hua didn't intend to open the golden visiting card, Fu Jiwen shifted his gaze away from the golden visiting card and looked at the auction. At this time, the auction was as lively as a marketplace. Although there were no peddlers, the several old men, whose veins were bulging, looked like old beggars who were pointing and gesticulating around a vegetable stall. Where was the elegance in them? Where was the etiquette? It was as if the beauty of their first love was suddenly exposed in front of everyone, and they were trying their best to hide it. However, as Xiao Hua watched, he felt somewhat sorrowful in his heart. Yes, the people of the secular world often said that there were only 2 words in this world, either fame or fortune. Everything else was born for fame and fortune, and if these 2 words were combined into one, they would become one word, and that would be profit. All the people in the world came for profit, and all the people in the world went for profit. This was exactly the case. Similarly, in the eyes of cultivators, there were also 2 words, either merit or longevity. All other things were born for this merit and longevity. This skill was naturally the cultivation level, the realm, and the strength. This longevity was also lifespan, and immortality that cultivators pursued. If these two words were combined into one, it would be longevity. The cultivators in the world had countless methods: killing and robbing, deceiving each other, and being selfish. Wasn't it all for strength? And with strength, wasn't collecting a lot of resources for one's own longevity? It could also be said that everything in the world came for longevity, and everything in the world went for longevity. On the other hand, these seemingly inflexible scholars, although they took advantage of their seniority and pointed fingers at others, what they stubbornly defended was also the thought in their hearts. This thought was the inheritance of Confucian cultivation, the essence of Confucian cultivation, the true meaning of Confucian cultivation. Perhaps Dao Shan, who doesn't have any cultivation, can be compared to them. Looking at these rotten scholars, Xiaohua couldn't help but think of Dao Shan. When they had just arrived at the Seven Suns Temple tonight, Dao Shan's meticulous etiquette and clean and decent Taoist robes had left a deep impression on Xiaohua. This might be the last pride of these so-called rotten scholars, and also their last struggle. Xiaohua looked at the few old men who were panting and shouting hoarsely as he thought to himself, in the torrent of people who pursue profits, the so-called persistence can only be regarded as pedantic and can only be used as a support. In the eyes of others, the dignity that they try their best to maintain can only be regarded as the performance of actors, which can only make people laugh. Perhaps such a Confucian cultivator is the hope of Taoism? Thinking of Xiao Yi's mockery of these rotten scholars, Xiaohua understood that the previous inheritance of Confucian cultivation had already declined, and the Taoist cultivation method that they had always ridiculed had gradually appeared. Even if it was only the beginning, it was clear that the essence of Taoism cultivation had already been implanted in the hearts of the new generation of Confucian cultivators. After another half a meal of cultivation, several white-haired rotten scholars collapsed on the ground. After all, they were already old, and their bodies could no longer support their rainbow-like ideals. Several Xiao Yis from the Bright Moon Palace leisurely walked over and offered hot tea and pastries. But how could these old men use the pastries of the Bright Moon Palace? What was the difference between this and food that was given away? The old man's face was pale, and with a wave of his sleeve, all the pastries and hot water fell to the ground. He stepped on the pastries and slowly staggered away. Looking at these lonely figures, the entire Bright Moon Palace was deathly silent. Other people might not have thought as much as Xiaohua, but these old men's actions that pointed directly at their hearts caused them to naturally feel ashamed in their hearts, an indescribable sense of inferiority. Sigh. Contrary to Xiaohua's expectations, Fu Jiwen, who was beside him, looked at these old men with an indescribable expression in his eyes. He sighed deeply, and his tone was obviously heavy. "Young Master Fu?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "Could it be you have other thoughts about these rotten scholars?" "Hee, fellow Taoist Xiao also knows about rotten scholars?" Fu Jiwen smiled faintly. "This humble one not only has some thoughts, but this humble one has also been deeply harmed by them." "Deeply harmed by them?" Xiaohua was even more puzzled. "Can you tell me more about it?" "I'm really sorry, fellow Taoist Xiao, but this is this humble one's privacy, and it's not good to joke about it." Fu Jiwen shook his head. "However, although this humble one says that this humble one has been deeply harmed by them, the root of this harm is still love. It's just that this love is too heavy, too old-fashioned." Xiaohua looked thoughtfully at Fu Jiwen's complicated expression, then smiled and said, "As long as it's love, then it's fine. Whether it's old-fashioned or heavy, it's better than nothing. Moreover, this is love, the most selfless thing in the world. However, everyone must remember that this is just a name. There's no need to take the rest seriously." Apart from Senior Han Fei Zi, the other representatives of the legalists are Li Si and Shang Yang. As for Senior Han Cheng, he's a descendant of Senior Han Fei Zi. As for which generation, I'm not too sure. Apart from the legalists, what other 99 schools are there? Xiaohua finally couldn't help but ask. Fu Jiwen smiled and waved his hand. Fellow Taoist, you misunderstand. The esoteric debate is just a description of the numerous and complex schools of thought. There aren't really 100 schools of thought. To be honest, according to the historical records, there were many schools of thought that hadn't been founded. How could there be only 100? There were more than thousands. Confucianism is actually this prosperous? Xiaohua was truly amazed. Apart from the legalists, the most famous schools are the Confucians, the Mahists, the militarists, the scholars, the Yin-Yang school, the school of vertical and horizontal, the school of miscellaneous, the school of farmer, the school of fiction, the school of martial arts, and other schools of thought. Fu Jiwen said simply. Even if it's just these simple and famous schools, I'm afraid fellow Taoist Xiao will be confused if I explain them one by one. Why don't you take a look at what scrolls the Bright Moon Palace is selling, and I'll slowly explain them to fellow Taoist. Hee, that's great, Xiaohua nodded. To be honest, when he heard the legalists say something like, don't be too close or distant, don't be too noble or lowly, cut off by law, Xiaohua felt a headache coming on. He was a genuine Taoist cultivator. Although he had some Confucian foundation, he didn't have the slightest understanding of any theories or poetry. How could he possibly understand? He might as well listen to the stories of the 10 great imperial artifacts. -11. Chapter 3280. Yu Linfeng smiled and raised his hand. Han Cheng's scroll slowly flew to Yu Linfeng's eyes. Yu Linfeng carefully reached out and pinched the purple thread. With a gentle tug, the scroll slowly unfurled. Swoosh! A pure white light shot out from where the scroll was unfurled, as if opening a door under the sun. Buzz! Another sword hum followed the white light. Boom! The light was so dazzling that even someone as strong as Xiaohua couldn't help but squint. Before he could get used to the light, another muffled, thunderous sound rushed out from the scroll like a torrential river, going against the heavens and rushing towards the top of the Bright Moon Palace. Silala. With a sound that sounded like it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, the defensive primary formation on top of the Bright Moon Palace was instantly destroyed by the overwhelming gang qi contained within the white light. Not only did the countless sword cries within the Bright Moon Palace resonate, but the overwhelming gang qi also pierced straight into the night sky like a giant sword. Bright Moon Square was a place that didn't sleep. It was brightly lit, and people didn't sleep at all. Zhaixinglu was an extremely mysterious place to them, because those who could come to Bright Moon Square were all rich, but rich people might not be able to go to Zhaixinglu. Even if some people who didn't know the details wanted to take a look at Zhaixinglu, they didn't have any vitality stones or traces of cultivation. It was difficult for them to enter Zhaixinglu. Now, this giant flying sword was like a heavenly soldier rushing into the night sky. Everyone within 10 miles could see it clearly. How could they not be shocked? Inevitably, everyone in the Bright Moon Lane escaped from the nephrite and the fine wine. They stretched their bodies to look at the flying sword in the night sky, gesticulating with their hands and feet. They were abnormally excited as they discussed incessantly. Such a grand occasion was even more beautiful than any fireworks. Although all eyes in Bright Moon Square were focused on Zhaixinglu, although those who hadn't slept yet were also focused on Zhaixinglu, the vast energy that represented righteousness and righteousness couldn't illuminate the night sky. Between the light and darkness, there were still some ghosts that wandered freely in the darkness, undisturbed by the sharpness of the flying sword. This is the sword chi of a sword cultivator. The moment Han Qing opened the scroll, the brilliance was so brilliant that Xiaohua couldn't help but close his eyes. However, even so, the large law character still passed through Xiaohua's eyes and engraved itself into his mind. Every stroke of this law character was in the shape of a flying sword. The entire brilliance rushing into the night sky was also a soaring sword energy. Xiaohua, who was used to seeing sword chi in Dawn Rain Continent, couldn't help but groan. He completely understood in his heart. This sword cultivator is indeed a branch of Confucian cultivator. Moreover, it actually originated from Confucian cultivators' legalism. Alas, there are laws in the mortal world, with punishment as the guiding principle. There are laws in heaven and earth, with the sword as the guiding principle. Isn't the law of heaven and earth swept away by sword energy? Inside the Bright Moon Palace, the sounds of metal clanging could be heard. Some were the cries of swords, and some were the cries of weapons. Even some of the weaker cultivators had their true energy stirred. Whoosh! Yu Linfeng shook the scroll in his hand, and the scroll slowly closed up. The sword light that soared into the sky was absorbed into the scroll. Naturally, the sounds of metal clanging within the Bright Moon Palace gradually faded away, and the palace gradually returned to its previous calm. Good heavens! This is merely Senior Han Cheng's handwriting, but it already has such a powerful aura. The majestic aura contained in this handwriting can really shock heaven and earth. Even after fellow immortal you put away the scroll, this one still hasn't seen Senior Han's original handwriting. If someone were to hold this scroll, wouldn't it be comparable to an imperial weapon? A shocked voice couldn't help but speak. I just don't know. If it was Senior Han Fizi's original handwriting, what kind of aura would it have? Fellow immortal, what you said is also this one's thoughts. Yu Linfeng's eyes flashed with fervor as he looked at the scroll in front of him. Although this one hasn't seen that kind of heaven-shaking aura, this one heard from the seniors of Star-Plucking Tower that if it was Senior Han Fizi's handwriting, this brilliance should be able to penetrate the outer realms and reflect the power of the outer realm stars. No evil in the world can resist this power of starlight. In particular, if it was Senior Han Fizi's handwriting, what broke through just now wasn't my Bright Moon Palace's origin array, but all the restrictions within a radius of 100 li would no longer exist. Damn it! Others didn't say anything, but Xiao Hua jumped up first and scolded with a smile. How is that possible? This thing isn't a real spiritual treasure. Without anyone activating it, how can it have such power? Unfortunately, before Xiao Hua finished speaking, Fujiwen laughed and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, you're still lacking. What Yu Linfeng said. I'm afraid it's not enough to describe Senior Han Fizi's original handwriting at his peak. According to this one's ancestors, 100,000 years ago, when the demon realm invaded— What? Demon realm invaded? Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. This was the first time he heard about the demon realm in the hidden immortal continent. Yes, it's really that time when the demon realm invaded. Fujiwen didn't understand Xiao Hua's surprise and nodded. That time, Senior Han Fizi's original handwriting revealed its might for the first time. When it was opened, it directly killed 100 demon generals. 100 demon generals. Xiao Hua was flabbergasted. He already knew from Zhang Qingxiao that the strength of a demon general was comparable to the golden core and nascent soul stage of the Dao sect. This Senior Han Fizi's handwriting was actually able to kill 100 nascent soul stage demon generals. Wasn't this too unimaginable? Bragging. Although Xiao Hua didn't refute, it was obvious that he was already secretly criticizing. It's exactly 100 demon generals. Fujiwen laughed. Fellow Taoist, don't think this one is exaggerating. The righteous qi of us Confucian cultivators is the nemesis of the demon realm. Although their physical bodies are incomparably powerful, the demon flames and demon blood they cultivate have no resistance in front of the righteous qi of us Confucian cultivators, especially when they invaded my hidden immortal continent. In front of the righteous qi that has been settled for hundreds of millions of years, it was like a drop of water falling into a sea of fire. How could it set off a big wave? Oh, this one understands. Xiao Hua nodded. There is righteous qi in heaven and earth. Since ancient times, it has been supporting the justice of the world. As long as there are people, there will be this kind of aura, everlasting. No, what fellow Taoist said is wrong. Fujiwen shook his head. There is righteous qi in heaven and earth. This righteous qi has existed since ancient times and does not vary from person to person. Where there are people, there is righteous qi. Where there are no people, there is also righteous qi. It can be said that everything has righteous qi. Even the demon realm also has righteous qi. And this righteous qi is the true qi cultivated by Confucian cultivators. It is not the spiritual qi of heaven and earth cultivated by the Dao sect. Boom! Fujiwen's words were like a stone rushing into Xiao Hua's ancient well that had remained motionless for 10,000 years. Xiaohua instantly became like a clay statue. An indescribable fluctuation emitted from Xiaohua's body. The stardust that was originally covering his image instantly turned into dust and floated around Xiaohua. Of course, in just an instant, the starlight and silver light in Xiaohua's eyes retracted. All the dust fell around Xiaohua and turned back into stardust. A sudden realization came from Xiaohua's mouth. So it's like this. So it's like this. This one was wrong. Yes, Xiaohua was really wrong. His mistake was inconceivable. He had always been cultivating the righteous qi of Confucian cultivators, but what he refined was only the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. How could it be the righteous qi? No wonder he had been cultivating for 100 years and was still unable to condense his core. It turned out that the path he started on was wrong, and his success in refining essence into qi, most of it was because of the core that he passed on to others, right? Fellow Taoist Xiao? Fu Jiwen was somewhat puzzled. He hesitantly asked Xiaohua, "What's wrong?" He, nothing. Since he found the root, Xiaohua immediately felt refreshed. He said with a smile, "This one always thought that the righteous qi was the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Who knew that it was actually so different?" "Oh, that's natural." Fu Jiwen understood and said with a smile, "This is the difference between the Tao sect and Confucian cultivators. Of course there are differences. However, sometimes, the righteous qi has the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and the righteous qi within the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. However, it may not be possible to distinguish them clearly. Then, how can one distinguish the righteous qi?" Xiaohua asked tentatively, "Is it possible that there is a secret technique within the basic cultivation method of Confucian cultivators that is the same as the Tao sects?" "It's not the same." Fu Jiwen waved his hand and said, "The reason why Confucian cultivators are called Confucian cultivators is because they use the righteous qi as their foundation. They rely on Confucian to distinguish the righteous qi. Although everyone more or less has the righteous qi in their body, how can a common person like a common person understand the righteous qi? Only people like us who read and recite scriptures can read the righteous qi from the ancient characters. Only then can we use this righteous qi to trigger our own righteous qi. With our own righteous qi, only then can we draw in the righteous qi of heaven and earth." I've learned. Xiaohua nodded. He understood that the cultivation of Confucian cultivators was still the same. It seemed that the so-called secret technique was just an opportunistic trick of the Tao sect. Suddenly, Xiaohua's heart jumped. He seemed to have a bad premonition. He seemed to have thought of something and hurriedly asked, "Fu Jiwen, just now, did you see something?" "Fellow Taoist Xiao, what are you talking about?" Fu Jiwen was surprised by Xiaohua's question. He didn't know what was going on. Xiaohua saw Fu Jiwen's ignorance and unconsciously felt relieved. In the moment when he was absent-minded, Xue saw his death. Master Kachin also saw his death. Xiaohua didn't want this Confucian cultivator in front of him to follow in their footsteps. "It's nothing." Xiaohua waved his hand and said with a smile. However, just as he waved his hand a few times, he was stunned again. That's not right. If Confucian cultivators don't need the spiritual qi of heaven and earth to cultivate, then what spirit stones do they use? If they don't use spirit stones, why do they still use spirit stones on the hidden immortal continent? Xiaohua seemed to have suddenly woken up. He seemed to have suddenly become confused. He frowned and thought. -11. Chapter 3281. Forget it, let's just ask. Xiaohua bitterly smiled. Since I've already asked so many questions, I don't mind asking a few more idiotic questions. After Xiaohua finished speaking the doubts in his heart, it was Fu Jiwen's turn to be surprised. If it was some common knowledge from before, it could be said that Xiaohua was a cultivator from overseas and had not stepped on the continent for a long time, so he did not know much. However, this matter of origin stones was too inconceivable. Cough, cough. Xiaohua smiled. "Young Master Fu, I've always been a lone cultivator and I've always been self-sufficient, so I really don't know about this. Nothing. Fu Jiwen hurriedly waved his hand. "What you know is what you know. What you don't know is what you don't know." Fellow Taoist Xiao is indeed magnanimous. but I'm still lacking. Then, Fu Jiwen gave a simple explanation. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, this primordial stone also contained righteous qi. However, from what Fu Jiwen could see, the primordial stone was slightly inferior to the primordial qi used for Taoist cultivation. Of course, Confucian cultivators also had methods to absorb the noble spirit from the source stone. However, ordinary Confucian cultivators didn't use these methods. Confucian cultivators believed that the noble spirit was a living and lively world origin qi. Only the noble spirit that flowed between heaven and earth and was drawn from densely populated places was the best. Therefore, source stones were used to refine imperial equipment and arrange origin formations. So that's how it is. Xiaohua suddenly understood. Connecting it to what he saw with his illusion breaker eyes, there were many types of world origin qi in this world. If Taoists picked one type, Confucian cultivators could naturally choose another type, and the world origin qi could also be condensed into a spirit stone. However, absorbing the noble spirit from heaven and earth is somewhat difficult. It's easy to absorb the noble spirit from the source stone. Nowadays, students are greedy and many students have secretly started to use source stones to cultivate. Fu Jiwen sighed and said, especially my Taoist sect spirit pills. It is said that after refining with a special method, it can also promote the cultivation of Confucian cultivators. Students who haven't broken through for a long time have also started to try. Now, the spirit grass and spirit fruits are a lot more expensive than before. Humans are insatiable and always seek opportunities for themselves. In the long run, what difference will there be between Confucianism and Taoism? In any case, this Xiao is a Taoist, so I won't worry about Confucian cultivators. Xiao Hua shrugged. Everyone sweeps the snow in front of their own door. There's no need to worry about others. Looking back at the auction, legalist senior Han Cheng's handwriting had already set off a frenzy of bidding. Even young Master Duanmu, who was opposite Xiao Hua, was repeatedly bidding. Clearly, this handwriting was his main objective for coming to Zhai Xinglu this time. After more than 10 rounds of bidding, everyone finally stopped. No one else bid against young Master Duanmu. However, at this moment, everyone's gaze was focused on Xiao Hua. He thought that Xiao Hua hadn't opened his mouth to bid from beginning to end. Ha ha ha, Xiao Hua laughed. He finally understood why young Master Duanmu sent the visiting card. That was to test him, to show him a kind of intention. That was, to not let Xiao Hua compete with him in order to reach the bottom line in his heart. Add 10 high-grade primordial stones. Xiao Hua said indifferently. Boom. Everyone immediately cheered loudly. This one will also add 10 high-grade primordial stones. Young Master Duanmu's tone was also indifferent. It didn't matter if Xiao Hua increased the price. The key was that he couldn't force him step by step. In the end, it was just as young Master Duanmu thought. Xiao Hua only increased the price once, conveying that he already knew the meaning and didn't say anything else. This caused the cultivators who wanted to watch the show to feel sad. All right. Yu Linfeng had a smile on his face. With a wave of his hand, great scholar Han Cheng's handwriting flew into young Master Duanmu's pavilion. With another wave of his hand, the second scroll slowly landed in front of him. This is the second great scholar's handwriting today. Fellow immortals may not be familiar with this great scholar, but fellow immortals definitely know about Confucianism. This great scholar is the Yin Yang School's old master Zhou Yuanhan. Along with Yu Linfeng's long voice, he stretched out his slender finger and pulled the purple silk thread. As the scroll fell, 2 bright and dark rays of light suddenly appeared. Although it was somewhat inferior to Han Cheng's sword qi, the light and dark rays had a solemn air of annihilation. At the same time, these 2 rays of light soared into the sky, higher than the previous sword qi, and formed the shape of a huge yin-yang fish in the night sky. As the brilliance of this yin-yang fish circulated in the night sky, thousands of evil spirits scattered in the night sky, causing the entire bright moon square to seem to tremble. Clear yang is the sky. Turbid yin is the earth. Above the earth is the clouds. Below the sky is the rain. Rain comes from the earth. Clouds come from the sky. Yin and yang are the Tao of heaven and earth, the outline of all things, the parents of change, the origin of life and death, and the abode of the gods. Fu Jiwen looked at the yin-yang fish in the sky through the broken origin array of the bright moon palace and sighed. Heaven and earth have yin and yin and yang turn into two qis. Everything can be divided into two sides, yin and yang. This school of yin-yang advocates controlling the yin and yang of heaven and earth, using the two qis of yin and yang to kill all things. The great scholar who established the school of yin-yang was Zhou Yin. Later on, because he was called Zi, he was given the name Zhou Yinzi. This old master Zhou Yuanhan is most likely his descendant. AI, the esoteric debate is indeed formidable. Xiao Hua clapped his hands and said, even though our Taoism also has the saying that Tao begets one, and one is divided into yin and yang, but the profoundness of yin and yang is truly obscure. Without a certain level of cultivation, how can one understand it? This Xiao really did not expect that this Confucian cultivator actually has a school of yin-yang that specializes in studying yin and yang. Furthermore, this Xiao admires this senior Zhou Yinzi even more. How can he explain yin and yang so clearly? That's right, 100 years ago, when Xue Xue and Wu Hai's soul entered Xiaohua's space, he had already experienced the division of yin and yang. If one were to talk about comprehension, Xiaohua himself indeed has a lot. However, if one were to ask him to form a theory and explain it, it would be extremely difficult. Just like what the Taoists often say, Tao can be said, but it is not an ordinary Tao. Name can be named, but it is not an ordinary name. Just a few words can indeed extend a lot of comprehension, or can only be understood, but not explained. Actually, a strange expression appeared on Fu Jiwen's face. He hesitated for a bit, then smiled and said, this yin-yang school might have been extremely powerful in the past. It is said that Senior Zhou Yinzi obtained an innate spiritual object called the Yin-Yang Illustrated Handbook. From it, he comprehended the Tao of yin and yang and established his own school. However, as the yin-yang school of yin-yang developed, the yin-yang Illustrated Handbook was lost for some unknown reason. The yin-yang school of yin-yang's research on yin and yang gradually deviated. Didn't fellow Taoist Yulin Finjiu say it clearly just now? Everyone might not know about Zhou Yinzi, but almost everyone in the yin-yang school knows about him. That's because the current yin and yang more or less falls into the intersection of yin and yang. Some crooked sects, such as the yin-yang unity school, also pass down some of their secret techniques from the yin-yang school of yin-yang. At this point, Fu Jiwen did not say anything else. Xiao Hua was also a person who had undergone dual cultivation. How could he not understand? Perhaps some dual cultivation secret technique, some fusion technique. These yin and yang mating techniques were the things that the yin-yang school of yin-yang was talking about, right? Decline. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. This might be the current situation that those so-called rotten scholars don't want to see. Fu Jiwen smiled and said, time flies, clouds and flowers pass by like water. On this hidden, immortal continent, not only are the dynasties of 10,000 countries replaced, even the 100 schools are also being washed away by great waves. Only schools and doctrines that can adapt to the changes of the times can truly be preserved. These are not things that can be done by humans. Back then, the Tao sect was tyrannical for a period of time. It could almost contend with the Confucian cultivators, Buddhist sects, and even the demon race. However, what about the current Tao sect? After the ancient war, wasn't it also obliterated? If you want to revive the Tao sect, is it something that can be done by a few generations? Let's not talk about this. When Fu Jiwen talked about the decline of the Tao sect, he seemed to be afraid that Xiao Hua would be displeased. So he changed the topic. Looking at the fierce bidding scene downstairs, he said, such a rare yin-yang school of yin-yang writing. Doesn't fellow Taoist Xiao want to bid for one? Even if this thing's true qi is used up, it is still an authentic work handed down from generation to generation. Forget it, Xiao Hua said with a smile. If it was some yin-yang illustrated handbook, if it was some harmony secret manual, this Xiao would still be interested. What kind of writing is this? This Xiao doesn't understand. Pfft, Fu Jiwen laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao is really a straightforward person. If it was an ordinary Confucian scholar, they would definitely not say these words. You dare to do it while hiding in your room, but don't dare to say it when you come out? Xiao Hua snorted disdainfully. If you want to say it, you have to use alternative words. For example, the joy of the boudoir is even greater than the one who draws the eyebrows. Fellow Taoist Zhao's straightforwardness is a disgrace to the refined. Damn it, to turn a good yin-yang into a marriage, isn't this a disgrace to the refined? Xiaohua really couldn't see through the act of covering one's ears while stealing a bell, especially using words to replace imagination. It was really annoying. While the two were talking, that Zhou Yuanhan's old man Zhou's calligraphy was also bought by a certain senior on the third floor. Xiaohua also clearly saw that young master Duanmu also seemed to slightly raise the price and immediately gave up. Clearly, he also had a tacit understanding with the others. Xiaohua could know, and Yu Linfeng even more so. However, this was a kind of mutual compromise. The price of the calligraphy was something that both sides could bear. Who would care about the movements behind the scenes? Yu Linfeng sent that scroll to the third floor's balcony and began to bluff the third scroll. Fellow immortals, the writing on this third scroll is also very famous. Moreover, this school created a Confucian cultivation method that is widely spread in my hidden immortal continent. As he said that, Yu Linfeng opened this scroll again. Wah! Like a burst of water, 10,000 rays of brilliance poured out from the scroll. Like the Milky Way pouring out, it directly rushed into the night sky. It was incomparably gorgeous. Noble Spirit River. Dozens of young voices shouted in unison. This is the school of vertical and horizontal Confucian cultivators. Haha. Yu Linfeng laughed loudly and said, correct, correct. The river character on this scroll is the authentic work of the school of vertical and horizontal Confucian Lu Cheng, Lu Wansheng. -11. Chapter 3282. Upstairs, Fu Jiwen pointed at the righteous spirit that flashed like the Milky Way and said, the school of vertical and horizontal is a very famous school in the esoteric debate. The school of vertical and horizontal is 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 the school of vertical and horizontal. This is the so-called vertical and horizontal. The school of vertical and horizontal was created by the two seniors Zhang Yi and Su Qin. Senior Su Qin advocated the vertical and Senior Zhang Yi advocated the horizontal. It was in the vertical and horizontal that the two seniors comprehended the true essence of water flow and created the cultivation method of the righteous spirit Long River. Using this as a basis, they were honored as Su Qin Zi and Zhang Yi Zi respectively, leaving their names in history. Moreover, this righteous spirit Long River is very easy to obtain. It is the simplest among the many cultivation methods of the Confucian cultivators. Therefore, once this cultivation method was spread out, it was immediately passed down. In the ancient times, the number of disciples of the school of vertical and horizontal were as many as the hairs on an ox. The Confucian cultivators who answered in unison just now were most likely disciples who cultivated the righteous spirit Long River. Of course, now that this cultivation method has been spread out, they may not necessarily be disciples of the school of vertical and horizontal. As Fu Jiwen spoke, many cultivators began to bid again. This time, the liveliness was even greater than before. This was because great scholar Lu Cheng's handwriting not only had the same righteous spirit Long River as the previous handwriting, but also the true essence of the righteous spirit Long River could be found in this handwriting. This was the so-called killing two birds with one stone. All the Confucian cultivators who cultivated the righteous spirit Long River naturally rushed like ducks. After seeing the righteous spirit Long River of legalism, school of yin-yang, and school of vertical and horizontal, Xiaohua was looking forward to the handwriting in the last scroll. He simply didn't ask about the 10 great imperial artifacts that Fu Jiwen hadn't explained yet. He smiled and stuck his head out, looking at the sounds of bidding below with interest. Fu Jiwen saw that Xiaohua's attention wasn't here and didn't say much. He looked at Xiaohua's star-like figure with some confusion. He really didn't understand why Xiaohua asked him so much common sense. That's right, common sense. As a cultivator of the hidden immortal continent, whether they cultivated Confucian cultivators, Buddhist cultivators, or even Taoist cultivation methods, as long as they grew up here, they should know this common sense. Although Xiaohua was a Tao sect cultivator and didn't understand the cultivation of Confucian cultivators, The Hundred Schools debate was an ancient story. The 10 great imperial artifacts were stories that ordinary people grew up listening to. How could Xiao Hua not know? Even if he was an overseas rogue cultivator, he still had to grow up, right? Fu Jiwen did not believe that a cultivator who grew up in the hidden immortal continent would not know about the 10 great imperial equipment. Perhaps fellow Taoist Xiao came from the Thousand Demons sacred realm or the Pure Land world. This was Fu Jiwen's final guess, but this guess was immediately doubted by himself. Essence stones, who in the 3 continents didn't know about them? Maybe he came from the Pure Land. That place doesn't need vitality stones. When the dust settled, to everyone's surprise, the authentic work of the school of vertical and horizontal's great scholar, Lu Wansheng, was not bought by the cultivators on the balcony. The final bidder was an unknown cultivator on the ground floor. Hee, looks like I'm not the only one who's keeping a low profile. Xiao Hua laughed. Fu Jiwen frowned and said, that might not be the case. In my opinion, I'm afraid several small aristocratic families or several sects gathered together to bid. Who cares who he is? It has nothing to do with me. I've never cultivated the noble spirit river, and I don't know anything about authentic works. Xiao Hua stretched, moreover. This star-picking towers auction, TSK, it's really boring. There's nothing that I want. Fu Jiwen laughed and said, right now, the auction is for Confucian cultivators. Dao sex items are very rare. What about the especially precious items? Perhaps at the end, fellow Taoist Xiao, please don't be impatient. I know. Xiao Hua nodded and pointed outside the window, saying, what I want to know now is, who is the owner of the last scroll? Which school is it from? The most famous of the 100 schools of Confucian cultivators are Confucian, Mahist, Legalist, Military, School of Famous, Yin Yang, School of Vertical and Horizontal, School of Miscellaneous, School of Farmer, School of Novels, and School of Vertical and Horizontal. Just now, 3 great Confucian scrolls appeared: School of Legalism, School of Yin Yang, and School of Vertical and Horizontal. As for the 4th school, it's hard to guess. Fu Jiwen's curiosity was also great. He pinched his chin and looked at Yu Linfeng holding the 4th scroll in his hand. Yu Linfeng's face carried a trace of mystery. His hand was placed on the purple silk rope, but he didn't release it. Instead, he raised his head and looked around, saying with a smile, this last scroll, I don't know if it's out of everyone's expectations. Before Yu Linfeng finished speaking, his finger shook. Boom! A violent vibration sounded, as if 10,000 horses were galloping. A 5-colored brilliance mixed with an indescribable noble spirit rushed out from the scroll. Xiao Hua was used to seeing the brilliance of Taoist cultivators' treasures. This 5-colored brilliance didn't count as anything magical. But Fu Jiwen actually jumped up from his chair in shock, shouting in shock, This is Confucian's 5 cheese unifications? Sure enough, that 5-colored noble spirit rushed into the night sky and actually formed an auspicious cloud several meters in size, illuminating half a mu of the sky. That 5-colored brilliance was different from when it rushed out just now. This time, it was extremely gentle, even more silky than a lover's gaze. And above this auspicious cloud, endless starlight faintly sprinkled down, enveloping the auspicious cloud. It really is Confucian's 5 cheese unifications. Fu Jiwen raised his head and said excitedly, Zhaixing Lu is indeed amazing, to actually be able to find the authentic writings of Confucian great Confucians. Nowadays, on the hidden immortal continent, the authentic writings of Confucian great Confucians have long been extinct. That's right. At this time, Xiao Hua suddenly shouted in hindsight, Young Master Fu, you just said that there must be Confucian writings among the century-old theories. Is Confucian the same as Confucian cultivators? Of course they're not the same. The excitement on Fu Jiwen's face hadn't disappeared, and he answered with a smile, Confucian cultivators are naturally a kind of cultivation method, just like what I just explained to fellow Taoist, using the noble spirit of heaven and earth as the foundation. And Confucian is a school of Confucian cultivators. It's just that the influence and scale of this school is far greater than the sum of the other schools. So this cultivation method is also called Confucian cultivators. It's not what fellow Taoist thinks, that Confucian cultivators are Confucian cultivators. At this point, Fu Jiwen smiled bitterly again, smacking his lips and saying, although that's the case, in reality, Confucian cultivators account for 90% of Confucian cultivators. Saying that Confucian cultivators are Confucian cultivators is not impossible. Who was the great scholar who founded Confucian? Xiao Hua's eyes lit up, and he asked with extreme curiosity. Speaking of Confucian cultivators, Fu Jiwen was also in high spirits, and he spoke frankly with assurance. Confucian cultivators are one of the most important schools of thought in the 100 schools of thought. Confucian cultivators use the 6 arts as their method: advocate etiquette, music, benevolence, and righteousness. They advocate loyalty and forgiveness, and they advocate the golden mean. They advocate rule of virtue and benevolence. Confucian cultivators emphasize the function of education, and they believe that heavy education and light punishment is the only way for a country to be stable and the people to be rich and happy. They advocate education without discrimination, and they should educate both the ruler and the ruled, so that the whole country from top to bottom becomes a person of high moral character. The founder of Confucian was surnamed Kong, and his name was Chiu. His courtesy name was Zhong'an'ai. He was from Yu Province's Lu country, and after he founded the Confucian school, he was revered as Confucius. Today, he is respectfully called Eternal Paragon by the later generations of Hidden Immortal Continent. The core of his theory is benevolence. He advocates love and demands that people should love each other and get along harmoniously. To realize benevolence, one must be tolerant of others, and do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. And the system or code of conduct that embodies benevolence is restrain oneself and return to etiquette. Confucius's works include poem, book, etiquette, music, and so on. These 5 books are the most famous, and they are often called the 5 classics by Hidden Immortal Continent. Other than Confucius, there are 2 other important figures in Confucian. One is Meng Ku, whose courtesy name is Ziyu. Senior Meng Ku advocates benevolence, and further proposes that the people are the most important, the state comes second, and the ruler is the least important. His ethics is good by nature. The other is Sun Kuang, and people at that time called him Sun Qing. He advocates benevolence and righteousness and the way of the king, and using virtue to convince people. He also proposed that the ruler is the boat, and the commoners are the water. The water carries the boat, and it also capsizes the boat. These 2 were also respectfully called Zi by later generations, Meng Zi and Sun Zi. The 4 books that Hidden Immortal Continent often refers to, De Shui, the Golden Mean, the Analects, and Meng Zi were written by these 3 great scholars. Although the cultivation method of Confucian cultivators was passed down from ancient times, it doesn't matter what it was called in the beginning. After Confucian cultivators appeared, this cultivation method became Confucian cultivators. Xiao Hua understood and sighed. The influence of Confucian cultivators on Hidden Immortal Continent is so deep. These opinions and propositions, although they are not cultivation, they are enough to have an impact on cultivation. This 5 Qis unifications should be the manifestation of the noble Qi in the chest of Confucian cultivators being condensed to the extreme, right? Fu Jiwen nodded and said, fellow Taoist Xiao is right. Confucian cultivators emphasize on entering the world, which is different from Taoist cultivators. Therefore, all Confucian cultivators have their own opinions to govern the country and educate the people. This is related to cultivation, but also has nothing to do with it. This 5 Qis unifications is the purpose of Confucian cultivators. As long as one cultivates to the realm of 5 Qis unifications, one's physical body can become a saint, and one can ascend. Hearing this, Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air, as if he had thought of an inconceivable question. He almost blurted out, then, the place where Confucian cultivators ascend is the immortal world? Is this immortal world the same as the immortal world of Taoists? Ha ha ha. Fu Jiwen laughed heartily. Fellow Taoist Xiao, if you want me to answer this question, I'm afraid you have to wait for me to cultivate to the realm of 5 Qis unifications, ascend to the immortal world, and then return from the immortal world, right? Hearing this, Xiao Hua touched his nose and helplessly said, "This is indeed true." At this time, at the auction, the people who were as shocked as Fu Jiwen were also boiling with excitement. The people who were familiar with each other were not only whispering, but even the people who didn't know each other were also saying something loudly. If they weren't showing off their talent, then they were showing off their knowledge. -11. Chapter 3283. Fellow Immortals. You can see it clearly. Yu Linfeng loudly said, "This is the word Confucian written by the Confucian school's senior Kong Liwen. When he wrote this scroll, he had already stepped into the realm of literary star. Therefore, the auspicious clouds of the 5 Qis unifications can also attract the starlight from the sky to destroy evil and exorcise demons. If this book was written by Confucius, the sage Kong Liwen, it would definitely be a clear cloud with a righteous aura. Not to mention the starlight, even if one's eyesight was slightly poor, they might not be able to see it." Fu Jiwen sighed. "Unfortunately, this one has only heard of it. This is the first time I've seen the handwriting of a great Confucian scholar." "Oh, why is that?" Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled. The Confucian school emphasizes the path of the golden mean. The golden mean is impartial and without fault. The common principle is the natural order of the heavens, the pinnacle of subtlety. Confucius's righteous aura must be quiet and without a trace, without the smoke and fire of the mortal world. This one understands. Xiao Hua nodded. Although he didn't quite understand the meaning of this sentence, within the Tao sect's magical techniques, the brilliant ones didn't necessarily have great power. It was precisely those magical techniques that contained terrifying power that were extremely restrained and wouldn't waste unnecessary spiritual qi. Seeing Yu Linfeng put away the scroll, the soaring righteous aura disappeared. Xiao Hua heard the bidding sounds downstairs, and his heart itched. He secretly pondered whether he should also get one to play with. Actually, this path of the golden mean originated from Confucius, but it flourished with Zhu Shi, old man Zhu. Fu Jiwen sorted out his mood, slowly sat down and said casually, "What? Zhu Shi? Old man Zhu?" Xiao Hua heard this and was suddenly shocked. "Is it the Confucian Zhu family?" "Oh, fellow Xiao actually knows about the Zhu family?" Fu Jiwen was greatly surprised. Xiao Hua laughed, "Hee, this one can't possibly not know anything. I've heard of this Zhu family. I wonder how they are now." "How are they now?" A strange expression appeared on Fu Jiwen's face again. He looked out of the window and said, "The Zhu clan has been passed down since ancient times and has lived in Wuyuan County of Shuzhou. Back then, Zhu Shi, Old Master Zhu's name, shook the hidden immortal continent. He was known as another great master after Confucius who could be respected as the. However, after the war between Confucianism and Buddhism, for some unknown reason, the once prosperous Zhu clan actually declined. In the end, it actually disappeared without a trace. Now, there are many surnames of Zhu on the hidden immortal continent, but I have never heard of anyone who is the true descendant of the Zhu clan." Xiao Hua inwardly nodded his head. He already understood that the Zhu family had likely been annihilated by the Tao sect. Their descendants should have been cursed by the Tao sect experts, causing them to slowly decline. It's a pity that the Zhu family has been annihilated, and so has the Zhu family's academic legacy. Fu Jiwen's face was filled with regret. Even now, there are still many students who frequently travel to Shuzhou's Wuyuan County to study, hoping to discover the heritage of the Zhu clan. That inheritance is second only to Confucius's knowledge. If you can get it, it will definitely be an amazing achievement. Hee, obtaining and achieving are two different things. Xiao Hua laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao is right. But since you can get it, you might be able to break through the Zhu clan's academic legacy and become a great scholar. Fu Jiwen also nodded his head. Who wouldn't like this kind of temptation? It's still fame and fortune. Xiao Hua bitterly smiled. While they were talking, the bidding for the authentic work of Senior Kong Liwen had finally reached the climax. Young Master Duanmu, who was opposite Xiao Hua, seemed to be competing with another VIP on the 3rd floor to raise the price, directly raising the price to a terrifying level. Unfortunately, in the end, Young Master Duanmu actually had no choice but to give up when the other party only increased the price by one top-grade primeval stone. This made Xiaohua sigh endlessly. Perhaps the 3 top-grade primeval stones that Xiaohua used to obstruct him were the last few straws that broke the camel's back. The bidding for the authentic work of great scholar came to an end. The next bidding was still for the items of hidden immortal continent. However, these things were mostly refining techniques of imperial tools. Only some great refiners had use for them. Not only were there few people bidding, even Xiaohua was too lazy to listen. He could be considered to be proficient in the refining techniques of Dao sect and soul cultivators. He also knew a lot of refining techniques of the devil world. Imperial tools, in essence, most of them were derived from Dao sect's tools. Xiaohua could refine spirit tools. Why would he be greedy for the refining techniques of imperial tools? Young Master Fu. Xiaohua raised his hand and took out some spirit fruits from the space. He handed them to Fu Jiwen and said, "Try these spirit fruits, and then continue to analyze the remaining 10 great imperial tools with this Xiao." Okay. Fu Jiwen clapped his hands and took the spirit fruit. He gently took a bite, tasted it, and said, "Can I bring some back?" "Of course you can." Xiaohua nodded his head. However, these spirit fruits are full of heaven and earth primeval qi. People without cultivation are not suitable to eat. This one understands. Fu Jiwen carefully received some and replied, "My wife likes these things, but this one is incompetent and can hardly satisfy her request." "Oh, so it's like that." Xiaohua understood and said enviously, "It's rare for your wife to be so loving, so this Xiao won't help you." Then, with a wave of Xiaohua's hand, a large pile of spirit fruits appeared on the table as if they didn't cost primeval stones. "Ah? This is too much." Fu Jiwen was shocked and hurriedly refused. "It's okay. It's just some snacks. Young Master Fu, take it and eat." Xiaohua casually waved his hand. "This Xiao has troubled you for so long. I'm sorry." "All right." Fu Jiwen was really moved in his heart and happily put all the spirit fruits into his small universe bag. Then, he took out a bright red fruit and said while eating, "Ranked above the mysterious demon chess are the tranquil flute and the heavenly sound zither." The reason why these 2 imperial equipment are placed together is because these 2 imperial equipment were used by the people of the Immortal Palace before the Golden Boy and Jade Girl were conferred into the Immortal Palace. Just now, didn't this one tell fellow Xiao that this music is one of the 5 classics of the Confucian school, and the art of music is also one of the compulsory lessons for students? The tranquil flute and the heavenly sound zither are imperial equipment that mainly use sound attacks. Of course, if we were to simply talk about the power of these 2 imperial equipment, I personally believe that they cannot be compared to the demon and god chess. Perhaps it is because everyone thinks that these 2 imperial equipment are elegant, so they place them on the demon and god chess. Speaking of the tranquil flute and the heavenly sound zither, naturally there is a story that everyone knows. Fu Jiwen said again, "In the early years, the Golden Boy and Jade Girl didn't know each other, and they were also enemies. When the 2 were young, they met in the same academy. It wasn't love at first sight, but after a long time, the 2 gradually developed feelings for each other. However, when the 2 were ready to reveal their relationship, they were discovered by their families. The 2 finally understood that their lovers were enemies, and under the opposition of the 2 families, the 2 couldn't get married. Therefore, the 2 had no choice but to stop their studies and fly away. However, since the seed of love was planted, it was inevitable that it would sprout. When the seed grew into a big tree, the Golden Boy and Jade Girl couldn't help but inquire about the other party's situation. When the 2 found out that the other party had rejected countless marriage proposals, and even Jade Girl didn't hesitate to fight with her life, the 2's hearts suddenly softened. Just when the 2 were about to get in touch, the war between the 2 families broke out. The 2 families fought in a dangerous situation and killed each other. Many of their elders died, and even if the 2 were in love with each other, they were forced to act against each other's families. At the end of the bloody battle, the 2 finally met, but the 2 couldn't bear to kill each other. At the crucial moment, the 2 stepped into the trap set by the 2 families in advance and prepared to go to the Yellow Springs together. This trap was set up by taking advantage of the danger of foreign objects. After the two fell into the dangerous situation, everyone thought that the two would die without a doubt. But after they fought a bloody battle for a night, they saw the inside of the dangerous situation shine brightly, and then a wonderful music like the sound of nature came out from inside. That music was like rain, and erased the blood in everyone's heart. That music was like the sound of heaven, and all the dead souls were transcended. In this music, everyone was remorseful, and everyone was reflecting. When the music was over, the two families didn't want to kill each other anymore. They shook hands and made peace, and vowed to be good for their families. When the two families made the vow, the golden boy and jade girl each took the tranquil heart flute and heavenly melody zither and flew out of the dangerous situation. The two were in love, and their love was stronger than gold. In the case of dying for love, the heavens were moved, and they actually obtained two imperial equipment in this dangerous situation. It was also these two who relied on these imperial equipment to change the blood feud between the two families. When the two cultivated to the 5-chi unification realm, they received the conferring document from the immortal palace and entered the immortal palace to serve. Made up. Hearing Fu Jiwen's words, Xiao Hua unrestrainedly asserted, "Not only is this story cliché, it's also full of flaws. Not to mention that when the two met in the academy, they didn't inquire about each other's background, and not to mention that the two were able to walk together in the battle between the two families, and went into the dangerous situation together. Just this imperial equipment, it's impossible to control it right away. The final ending is even more bullshit. I'm afraid that the old woman gave the name of the immortal palace to her young granddaughter to make them happy, right?" Fu Jiwen shrugged and said with a smile, "Maybe. But this story has been circulating in the hidden immortal continent for many years, and no one doubted it. Also, the tranquil heart flute and heavenly melody zither, these two imperial equipment are indeed from the immortal palace. It's said that when the immortal palace sent soldiers to capture the demons who didn't submit to the immortal palace, someone personally saw the power of these two imperial equipment. That's what the immortal palace used to trick people, to make people admire the immortal palace." Xiao Hua pointed with his hand and said downstairs, "Just like this Yu Lin Feng, saying so much, isn't it just to make people pay more origin stones?" "Ha ha ha," Fu Jiwen laughed, because downstairs, Fu Jiwen was bidding for a phoenix tail zither and was exaggerating. -11. Chapter 3284. By the way, what do you mean by immortal palace capturing unruly demons? Xiao Hua asked in confusion. Does Immortal Palace still care about Hidden Immortal Continent? Hidden Immortal Continent has tens of thousands of countries and hundreds of millions of people. Fu Jiwen explained, these ordinary governance rights are all in the hands of the kings of the 10,000 countries. Immortal Palace naturally won't intervene. Even if the country's power changes, Immortal Palace still won't care. Even if a power different from Confucian cultivators appears, Immortal Palace may not intervene. But if these powers openly compete with Immortal Palace, openly oppose Confucian cultivators, and openly slaughter Confucian cultivators, then Immortal Palace will definitely kill them. According to what I know, 800 years ago, in the Yong province, there was a powerful bull demon who wanted to establish his own empire. Moreover, he treated the common people of the Yong province as his food. This angered the Immortal Palace, and they sent troops to kill that bull demon. Oh, isn't Bull Demon a demon of Thousand Demons' sacred realm? Can Immortal Palace just kill it? Xiao Hua asked in surprise. The real demons of Thousand Demons' sacred realm have never disdained to come to Hidden Immortal Continent and Western Paradise. The demons that can appear in Hidden Immortal Continent are not the orthodox demons of Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Moreover, Thousand Demons' Sacred Realm's Great Sage Palace has also publicly announced that any demon that enters Hidden Immortal Continent and Western Paradise will be killed without mercy. Fu Jiwen said with a smile. So Immortal Palace also didn't show mercy to this bull demon. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua understood. When he was about to ask what the number 1 ranked imperial equipment was, Yu Linfeng pressed his hand down. The Hidden Immortal Continent's light ball that was just flickering with brilliance immediately dimmed, and the light ball next to it started to glow. Fellow immortals, All the rare items of hidden immortal continents Confucian cultivators have been sold. Now, I will take out some rare items from Western Paradise. Please bid. As Yu Linfeng's voice fell, dang, 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 the sound of the wooden fish rang out from the ball of light, and the complete Sanskrit chants rang out at the same time. Amitba. The old monks who were sitting steadily had no choice but to put their palms together and stand up to shout. Namo Amitba. A Buddhist chant resounded throughout the entire place. The ball of light suddenly expanded and turned into a barefooted Buddha that was several feet tall. He stood in the air, and the swastika character between his brows and the benevolence in his slightly opened eyes instantly attracted everyone's attention. Swoosh! The barefoot Buddha waved his hand, and it came crashing down like a mountain. Dang, 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 dang. A series of hurried sounds of the wooden fish rang out again, and then there was a deathly silence. Whether it was the wooden fish or the Sanskrit chanting, both had disappeared. As the Buddha's huge hand pressed down, the entire Buddha flickered with golden light, and in a breath's time, it turned into fireflies. The fireflies danced in the air for a moment, and then condensed into the outline of the Nirvana world. Just like before, there were more than 10 slightly larger balls of light. These balls of light were different from the ones in the hidden immortal continent. There were no other colors, only pure Buddhist light. Namo Amitba. Several old monks chanted in unison. As I heard, for a time, Bagafan lived at the top of the Eagle Peak in the royal residence city, along with a group of 1,250 people. They were all arhats, and they were all exhausted. No more worries, truly free. Their hearts were good, and their wisdom was good, like a wise horse or a great dragon. What they had done, they had done. They had abandoned all burdens, they had grasped their own benefits, and they were all tied up. They knew that they were free, and their hearts were free. Apart from Ananda, they lived alone and learned to obtain the fruit of pre-flow. Mahakasyapa was the highest. Several old monks were solemn as they chanted Buddhist scriptures. The entire auction house was silent for a moment, and then there was a lot of noise. Clearly, these Confucian cultivators were not very interested in Buddhism. Yu Linfeng had an apologetic smile on his face. He raised his hand and saluted to his left and right. My hidden immortal continent is a land of etiquette. Since there are treasures of Buddhism here, we naturally have to respect them. We will wait for a moment, and it won't be too late to bid after these masters finish chanting. Yu Linfeng, hurry up. It's already late. I still have to go back and meditate with my beautiful concubine. Who's here to listen to their nonsense for no reason? Who would have thought that just as Yu Linfeng's voice fell, an irritable voice rang out. Not only was it blaming Yu Linfeng, it was also ridiculing Buddhism's old monks. Yu Linfeng saw that everyone was unhappy and bitterly smiled. Since it's like this, then I will start bidding. With that, Yu Linfeng grabbed with his hand, and a Buddhist light flew out from the outline of the Pure Land and landed in front of Yu Linfeng. When the Buddhist light faded away, it was a monk's staff. That monk's staff had 6 dragons coiled around it, and each dragon head was extremely ferocious. Where was the benevolent appearance of Buddhism? This is one of the 18 treasures of the Pure Land. It is said to be the personal item of the famous Buddhist monk, Miaochan. These 6 dragons are the protectors of Buddhism. This monk's staff has the power of 6 dragons after using Buddhism's secret technique. And with this 6-dragon monk's staff, one can also ride the wind. Yu Linfeng gave a brief introduction, then continued. I'm afraid that only Buddhism's experts can clearly see the mysteries of this monk's staff. I'm not fated with Buddhism, so I can't explain it clearly. The starting price of this monk's staff is 10 upper-grade vitality stones, and each increment is 1 upper-grade vitality stone. I invite the fated person to make a bid. Just as Yu Linfeng finished speaking, someone immediately raised their hand to bid, out of Xiaohua's expectations. Strange. Xiaohua laughed. Weren't there a lot of people making a racket just now? Why didn't they wait for these monks to finish reciting the scriptures before making a move? Could it be that they're trying to sell dog meat under false pretenses? Fu Jiwen looked around and hesitated. He whispered, I'm not sure about this situation. I remember that when I came down last time, there were very few people bidding for these Buddhist artifacts. Most of them weren't sold. Perhaps these people were planted by Zhai Xinglu? Xiao Hua frowned. They want the old monks of Buddhism to pay more vitality stones? Not necessarily. Fu Jiwen shook his head. These old monks of Buddhism don't care about ordinary Buddhist artifacts. They're eager to throw the Buddhist artifacts, scriptures, and Buddhas from nirvana to hidden immortal continent. What they care about are the relics of the eminent monks. Although those relics contain the psyche power of the eminent monks, most of it is the karma of the eminent monks. These karma are extremely difficult to control and can only be transcended using Buddhism. If it's obtained by someone with ill intentions, it may have an adverse effect on Buddhism. Moreover, relics are also the bodies of the eminent monks. Buddhism won't let them wander outside and want to bring them back to nirvana to be buried. Xiao Hua nodded. If that's the case, these bidders should have the cultivation of Buddhism. I'm afraid that's the case. Seeing the auction gradually becoming lively, Fu Jiwen sighed. Buddhism's invasion of Confucian cultivators is very serious. Bronze Pillar Country strictly forbids Taoist and Buddhist temples, but it can't stop Confucian cultivators from practicing Buddhism's cultivation methods. Many Confucian cultivators who can't make any progress in Confucian cultivation may turn their eyes to Taoist and Buddhist sects, wanting to use them to advance their cultivation. And Buddhism's cultivation methods and heart sutras have always been given away casually. Confucian cultivators with cultivation experience can easily enter the sect. In the long run, hidden immortal continent's Confucian cultivators will no longer be Confucian. Young Master Fu, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Don't ask others to worry. Don't you also have the cultivation of Taoist? Fu Jiwen hesitated slightly and shook his head slightly. My situation is different from theirs and also different from fellow Xiao. All right. Xiao Hua didn't pursue the matter. After all, this matter already involved Fu Jiwen's secret. But at this moment, Xiao Hua suddenly thought of something. Oh right, young Master Fu, didn't you say that there would be flying imperial devices from hidden immortal continent? Why aren't there any? The last time I came, I saw Bright Moon Palace bid for quite a few flying imperial devices. This time, I'm afraid there aren't any left? Fu Jiwen said hesitantly. Or perhaps, when the last few imperial devices are up for auction, we'll bid again? Forget it. Let's wait and see. Xiao Hua nodded and looked at the auction. After the six-dragon staff, there were some other Buddhist artifacts, or prayer beads, or alms bowls, or incense burners. There was even a water bottle with a willow stuck on it. Seeing the aqua vase appear, Xiao Hua almost jumped up. However, when he saw the numerous sprouts on the willow tree that were trying their best to grow, he sat down. It was very obvious that the willow tree branch was a living thing. Perhaps it was broken off by some little bird at dusk and inserted into the aqua vase. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua asked again, Young Master Fu, do you know what the Buddhist sect's Bhikkhu's 18 objects are? Of course I know. Fu Jiwen said very casually. The 18 objects are the 18 objects that Buddhist sect's eminent monks often carry with them. These 18 objects are the Buddhist sect's eminent monks' protection. Unfortunately, one of them has committed a minor sin. Among them, there are 3 grades, heavy, medium, and light. That is, Li Sanyi is shedding, which is a heavy sin. Li Bo is Tuji Luo, which is a medium sin. The rest are light sins. These ordinary Buddhist sect monks only use 6 kinds of things: Li Sanyi, Li Bo, and water pouch. These 6 kinds of things are known as the Bhikkhu's 6 objects. Although this humble one did not deliberately listen to these things, the monks who are everywhere often preach them. This humble one listened and understood. Immediately after, Fu Jiwen looked at the kasaya that he was bidding for. He pointed at it and said, in fact, these 18 objects are what ordinary people need in life. They are yangzhi, which is a wooden chip used to remove the stench in the mouth; bathing bean, which is a powder ground from soybeans, beans, and peas, which is used for bathing and washing; Li Sanyi, which refers to the 3 kinds of clothes of Sangha, Yudoro, and Ontua; Li Bo, which refers to the army's 3 kinds of clothes; Li Bo, which is a water bottle used to hold water for washing or drinking. Libo, which is also known as a measuring vessel, which is used to hold food. Libo, which is a cloth on the ground or on the bed when sitting or lying down. Libo, which is a staff with a libo on the head. When walking, the libo vibrates to alert people of insects on the road, or when begging to attract people's attention. Incense burner, which is an instrument used to burn incense and invite Buddhas. Libo, which is also known as a water filter, a cloth used to filter insects in water. Libo, which is a cloth used to wipe hands, including face wipes, body wipes, and feet wipes. Knife, which is used to cut clothes, shave hair, and cut claws. Libo, which is a flintlock used to strike a fire. Libo, which is a tool used to pluck out nose hairs or thorns. Libo, which is a bed made of rope, which is convenient for sitting in meditation. -11. Chapter 3285. So that's how it is. Xiao Hua stared blankly for a moment before bursting into laughter. I thought the 18 objects were some profound things, but it turns out, it's just like this. However, the Buddhist artifacts of the Buddhist sect need to be supported by the Buddhist Dharma. They need to be constantly nourished by their psyche power, so most of the Buddhist artifacts come from these 18 objects. Fu Jiwen pointed out the strangeness, because these 18 objects don't leave the monk's side every day. Forget it, thinking about the Kasaya on top of his Buddha Sarira, the 9-dragon staff, and even the clear water bottle, all of which were things that the old monk never left his body for who knows how many years ago. Xiaohua felt a bit sick of them. However, since they were all worn by the Buddha Sarira, Xiaohua didn't think of throwing them away. The fun is here. Just when Xiaohua was feeling disgusted by the Buddhist artifacts and was somewhat distracted, Fu Jiwen suddenly stood up from the chair and walked to the window with a smile. Oh! Xiaohua was also curious. He looked outside and saw that there were dozens of jade boxes lined up in front of Yulinfeng. Each jade box was wide open, and inside were sariras as big as chicken eggs and as small as soybeans. These sariras were of different quality. Some emitted pure Buddhist light, while others emitted multicolored light. Not only Xiaohua, who had already condensed a 4th-stage lotus platform, could tell at a glance, but even a Confucian scholar who didn't have the cultivation of a Buddhist sect could also tell. However, Yulinfeng's voice sounded again. Fellow immortals, these are the sariras of the Buddhist monks that my Zhai Xing Lu painstakingly found near Yu province. As for the use of these sariras, there are Buddhist monks here, so I can't say it clearly. However, if there's anyone who doesn't know, you can go to my Zhai Xing Lu's place to look for it. All I have to say is that the Buddhist light is incomparably pure and can perfectly blend with the righteous energy of my Confucian cultivator. The base price of each of these Buddhist relics is 1 top-grade primeval stone. Damn it. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is the hidden immortal continent, 1 top-grade primeval stone. What kind of concept is that? Just now, the true work of the great Confucian scholar only used a top-grade primeval stone as the base price. How could these relics have a base price of 1 top-grade primeval stone? What was more special was that these relics were of different qualities. Zhai Xing Lu's starting price was 1 supreme-grade primordial stone. Wasn't that clearly bullying? However, someone had really stepped forward to be bullied by Zhai Xing Lu. As soon as Yulinfeng finished speaking, a voice shouted, "I'll add 10 top-grade source stones for that untainted relic. This old man will add 50 upper-grade primordial stones. No, a relic of this quality can raise my nature energy by 2 grades. I'll give you 2 supreme-grade primordial stones. Fu Jiwen laughed. These people are really not afraid of trouble. Last time, when everyone made fun of these old monks, they still cared about their reputation and added upper-grade primordial stones one by one. This time, they actually added 2 top-grade primordial stones at once. Are they sure that these old monks are going to take action? Xiaohua faintly smiled and asked, if the old monk were to go into silent meditation, this Xiao would like to see how they will deal with this. That won't happen. Fu Jiwen shook his head and said, Buddhism emphasizes that monks don't lie. Whatever they say should definitely be believed. According to this one's knowledge, Every time Zhai Xinglu holds this kind of auction, they will definitely be present. All the relics will never be left behind. All of them will be bought by them. Humph. Monks don't lie? Say that again after you've seen people like Hanju? Xiaohua was rather disapproving of this sentence, but hearing the end, Xiaohua was flabbergasted. Then how much primordial stones will they spend? Fu Jiwen snorted and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao, why don't you see who is behind them? Who? Xiaohua seemed to have understood something, but he still asked. Behind them are the kind men and women of Burial Immortal Continent and Western Paradise Continent. The daily offerings of these trillions of kind men and women are unimaginable to ordinary people. These monks are relying on these offerings to straighten their backs and dare to challenge here. This is why they dare to say that every relic must be bought. Fu Jiwen sneered. It is also because of this, the relics here. These monks must buy them. Otherwise, they won't be able to answer to these kind men and women. Sigh. Xiaohua listened and looked at the several monks whose expressions were calm, as if they were not affected by the increasing bidding price of the relics. He sighed and said, respectfully welcoming the relics of the eminent monks back to Western Paradise Continent and letting the departed souls of these eminent monks rest in peace. This is originally a very good thing. If both sides were kind, it would be a good thing. But now one side is trying their best to raise the price, secretly rejoicing in their own gains, while the other side is fearless and unhesitatingly taking out the offerings of others. This is already not a good thing to respectfully welcome, but an evil thing to flaunt. I'm afraid this is one of the methods Buddhism uses to attract believers in Burial Immortal Continent, right? Fu Jiwen thought carefully and of course also felt sad. He nodded and said, Fellow Taoist Xiao is right. Even if this one is just a bystander, watching the show, it seems like I'm also helping the tyrant. That's natural. Xiaohua nodded and looked at the entire Bright Moon Palace. And this Zhai Xinglu is the chief evil and also the instigator. The secular people are right. Money is the source of all evil. Zhai Xinglu accumulates wealth like this. At this point, Fu Jiwen did not dare to talk nonsense anymore. Seeing that the monk from the Buddhist sect did not respond, the several Confucian scholars who had been aggressively bidding immediately lost their confidence. They began to raise the price one by one. However, the number of people who raised the price also decreased. Quite a number of people chose to withdraw. After all, not everyone was willing to try this kind of stimulation that was similar to beating drums and passing flowers. Umitba. Suddenly, one of the few old monks who looked relatively young took a step forward. He put his palms together and bowed to the surroundings. These relics are something that my Buddhist sect must obtain. I'm sure everyone already knows that. As for the meaning of the relics, this old monk also does not want to say much. These are the wandering souls of my Buddhism sect. This old monk is under the orders of the Buddha Lord to welcome them back to Western Paradise Continent. These relics can increase a Confucian cultivator's noble spirit, but correspondingly, the negative karma in the relics will also be added to the cultivator's body. Everyone here does not understand the secret arts of my Buddhism sect and does not know how to eliminate negative karma and get rid of negative karma. In the future, you will definitely be tired of this negative karma. Therefore, this old monk advises everyone here that greed is easy to breed and negative karma is difficult to eliminate. Practicing honestly is the right path. As he spoke, the monk pointed at the dozens of relics floating in the air. These are the wandering souls of my Buddhist sect's Arhat. My Buddha Lord is willing to redeem each wandering soul with 3 supreme-grade primordial stones. If anyone here is willing to pay a higher price than my Buddhism sect, then please go ahead. My Arhat's wandering souls cannot rest in peace in Western Paradise Continent. My Buddhist sect's hundreds of millions of benefactors who sincerely worship Buddha will also not be at ease. This monk. Upstairs, Fu Jiwen was stunned. He actually dares to threaten? Looks like the Buddhism sect also has no surplus food. Xiaohua sighed and looked at Yulinfeng. He knew this monk's threat was nothing. The only one who would suffer losses was Zhai Xinglu. Yulinfeng's brows frowned a little. Then he laughed and said loudly, the Buddhist sect's master has already made a big bid. I wonder which immortal friend wants to increase the price? How can there be anyone who wants to charge forward? Fu Jiwen lost interest and walked back to the chair from the window. He sat down and said, "This is hundreds of supreme-grade primordial stones. Who can afford it?" Just now, this monk already said those harsh words. If some idiot increases the price by one supreme-grade primordial stone, and these monks really give up, wouldn't this idiot cry himself to death? What if I take this idiot? Xiao Hua looked at the dozens of relics, his heart beating wildly, and he almost blurted out, "TCH, Fu Jiwen was disdainful. Fellow Taoist Xiao is neither a Confucian cultivator nor a member of the Buddhism sect. Why would you take this idiot? If you want to be, it should be someone from Zhaixing Lu." Hiss. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air and hurriedly suppressed the greed in his heart. Nonsense, it was a blessing to have 3 cultivators, but from another point of view, it was a great tragedy. In this conflict between Confucians and Buddhists, he might be caught in the middle. He might as well be a Taoist loose cultivator. Why would he expose his Buddhism sect cultivation for no reason? That's true, Xiao Hua nodded and looked at the scene. He smiled and said, "I bet that Zhaixing Lu will definitely test it out." Fu Jiwen shook his head slightly. "I don't think so, because there's really no need. Let's wait and see." Xiao Hua smiled but didn't say anything. Sure enough, after Yu Linfeng's words fell, no one spoke. After half a cup of tea's time, Yu Linfeng said helplessly, "If no one bids, this old man will add 3 supreme-grade primordial stones for each relic." A slightly shaky voice came from downstairs. Damn it! Fu Jiwen almost jumped out of his chair. This is too fake. The people downstairs, can they have hundreds of supreme-grade primordial stones? According to the rules, they have no right to bid at all. Haha, there's no need to be so angry. Xiao Hua smiled. This is just like how young Master Duanmu tested me. Zhaixing Lu must give the Buddhism sect face, and the Buddhism sect must give Zhaixing Lu an answer. This auction is just a question and answer, nothing more. And this Xiao is sure that the bidder will definitely get something from this supreme-grade primordial stone. Sure enough, just as Xiao Hua thought, the monk said lightly, "This old monk will add 1 supreme-grade primordial stone for each relic." That person didn't make a sound. Yu Linfeng laughed and waved his hand. The dozens of jade boxes closed at the same time and flew to the monk. The monk bowed and said, "Ba, many thanks to Zhaixing Lu for your help." -11. Chapter 3286. With a wave of the monk's yellow robes, the dozens of jade boxes disappeared at the same time. Then, with another wave of his hand, a small cosmos bag flew out of his sleeve and slowly landed in front of Yu Linfeng. "This is the ransom for the dozens of Buddhas. Yu Linfeng, please check it." Monks don't lie. I know that. Yu Linfeng naturally wouldn't check it and accepted it with a smile. Then, when he saw the old monks turn around and leave without a word, he hurriedly shouted, "I'll see you off, masters." Ba. The monks left, but a Buddhist chant that was as clear as spring water was left in the auction. Haha, an eminent monk is indeed an eminent monk. Although this Buddhist chant didn't contain a trace of psychokinesis, it was enough to hear one's heart. Yu Linfeng hurriedly laughed and said, "They turned around and left without leaving a speck of dust behind. Since the masters have left, Zhaixing Lu's auction is about to end. The treasures from the Pure Land have already fallen to the ground. Zhaixing Lu still has some items from the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm. However, the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm is too dangerous for the human race. These items are not even comparable to the ones from the Pure Land. Of course, these few items are definitely the best of the best. That's why Zhaixing Lu has always placed the items from the Thousand Demons Sacred Realm at the end of the auction." "Come on." Yu Linfeng finished speaking and waved his hand. Caw. A bird's cry that shook the entire place was suddenly heard. An extremely small light spot flew over from afar. In the blink of an eye, the light spot transformed into a bird that was several feet large. This bird looked like an eagle, but it wore a golden crown on its head. Under the golden crown, the majestic eagle's eyes shone with a light that couldn't be looked at directly. Boom! The bird spread its wings as it landed, and thousands of streams of light flew out from its huge wings. When the bird stretched its neck and let out a long cry, the thousands of streams of light rushed into the outline of the thousand demons' sacred realm and turned into a few spots of light. Fellow Taoist Xiao. On the balcony, Fu Jiwen smiled bitterly. I lost the bet earlier. I admit defeat. Haha, actually you didn't lose. Xiao Hua looked at the bird's shadow with interest and said with a smile, it's just that you never had the chance to come into contact with these scheming people, so you don't know what they're thinking. A loss is a loss. Fu Jiwen waved his hand. Fine, since you've lost, then tell me, what is the name of this bird? Why can it replace the thousand demons' sacred realm? Xiao Hua pointed. Contrary to Xiao Hua's expectations, Fu Jiwen actually shook his head and said, I know very little about the thousand demons' sacred realm, and I don't know what this flying beast is. If I'm not wrong, then this beast should be a great sage of the thousand demons' sacred realm. Only a great sage can represent the thousand demons' sacred realm. Alright, then what is a great sage? Saints are supreme beings. Fu Jiwen explains, our hidden immortal continent saints are supreme beings in the human realm. The great sage of the thousand demons' sacred realm is the title of the most powerful demon. Xiao Hua was naturally not satisfied with this kind of answer. He waved his hand and said, if you don't know, then you don't know. It seems like you really don't know. It's not just me who doesn't know. Fu Jiwen said with a smile. The thousand demons' sacred realm is a place where thousands of demons gather. If we humans go there, we'll be their food. In my hidden immortal continent, other than the great grandmaster and above seniors who have the qualifications to explore the thousand demons' sacred realm, no one else has ever been there. If fellow Xiao asks 100 people, it's already not bad if one person can answer clearly. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. Xiao Hua smiled faintly. You better reveal the mystery of the top 10 Imperial equipment. I'm looking forward to it. I wonder what the number 1 Imperial equipment will be. What can it be? Fu Jiwen smiled mysteriously and said, Fellow Xiao has never practiced martial arts before, so I'm afraid you don't know what it means to practice the blade for 100 days, practice the spear for 1,000 days, practice the sword for 10,000 days, right? Xiao Hua was startled and asked curiously, could it be that young Master Fu has practiced martial arts before? Of course. Fu Jiwen said proudly, hidden immortal continents Confucian scholars all have to practice the 6 arts. Martial arts, sword arts, and so on are all things that must be learned. I understand. Xiao Hua nodded. The top of the top 10 imperial equipment is the sword. Right. Fu Jiwen said with a smile. The sword is an ancient sacred item, the most revered and noble, worshipped by humans and gods. It's the ancestor of short weapons, a weapon for close combat. With its profound Tao skills, it became a legend. In fact, because it's light and convenient to carry, it's beautiful to wear, and it's quick to use, the hidden immortal continent's various dynasties, princes, emperors, marquises, scholars, swordsmen, merchants, and commoners, all of them take pride in it. Since ancient times, the sword and its skills have been unhindered in the battlefield, dominating the martial arts world, establishing a country, and upholding justice. Thus, it has been passed down to this day, and is still loved by the people of the world. With its glorious history, it's deeply rooted in people's hearts and can be passed down without decline. The top of the top 10 imperial equipment is precisely the tinder-like water sword. Tinder like water. Sword. Xiao Hua seemed to have understood something. Since ancient times, the most difficult thing to erase is the grace of a beauty. The sorrow of a beauty's feelings is like flowing water. If it can't be cut off, it will be chaotic. This tinder-like water sword is truly outstanding. That's right. This tinder-like water sword is like its name, a soft sword. The entire sword is transparent like water. When placed in water, it's the same as water. The sword's body is warm. After this sword is cut off, it can automatically fuse back together. Just like feelings. It can't be truly cut off. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Xiao Hua said thoughtfully, if it's only like this, how can it be the number 1 imperial equipment? Hee. The sharpest thing in this world is tenderness, and the most hurtful thing in this aristocratic family is also tenderness. This tinder, like water sword, can open the heavens with water droplets. When Fu Jiwen talked about tenderness, his eyes unexpectedly also showed tenderness. As long as there are still feelings in their hearts, they can't escape the attack of this tinder like water sword. It's said that in the past, the hidden immortal continent's pear blossom fairy was injured and abandoned by the nobles of the immortal palace. In a rage, she held the tinder like water sword and killed her way to the immortal palace. In front of the southern heavenly gate, her sword soared through the sky and annihilated tens of thousands of heavenly soldiers. When Empress Dowager led the immortal palace's Star River to kill the fairy's sword cut the Star River into two. Unfortunately, this tinder like water sword was broken by the starlight in the Star River and turned into a morning star that disappeared into the horizon. The pear blossom fairy even charged into the Star River with hatred, and her body and soul were destroyed. From then on, no matter what imperial equipment was born, it would be difficult for it to surpass. This tinder like water sword has always been listed as the #1 imperial equipment. Sigh, Xiaohua sighed. This is another sad but beautiful story. I wonder if this story is the #1 imperial equipment story? Or is it tinder like water sword that is the #1 imperial equipment? What's the difference? Fu Jiwen laughed. The things you can't get are always the best. The faintly discernible legends are always the most beautiful. The memories in a person's heart are always the most profound. Strange, hearing this, Xiaohua suddenly thought of his own wishful staff and immediately interrupted. The ancestor of short weapons, the staff is also the #1 weapon. Why isn't there a staff in the top 10 imperial equipment? Staff? Fu Jiwen scratched his head and laughed. Fellow Taoist Xiao must be joking. A staff? Isn't it just a staff? How can it be in the top 10 imperial equipment? Forget it. I won't play the lute to a cow with you. Xiaohua casually waved his hand, but before he could continue, his expression changed and he hurriedly looked at the auction hall. In front of Yu Linfeng, there was a jade slip. That's right, it was a jade slip commonly seen in the Dawn Rain continent. At this moment, it was floating in front of Yu Linfeng. Yu Linfeng said, "Fellow Taoists, this item is the jade I used by the ancient Taoists before they were destroyed by us Confucian cultivators. It should have been placed in the Taoist trifling item auction, but because this item was obtained from the Thousand Demons sacred realm, it wasn't taken out until now. This item's inspection method is different from the jade eye. After Zhai Xinglu obtained it, we searched through the ancient records and found out that this item was called a jade slip. After that, Zhai Xinglu specially found a Taoist expert and used their unique divine sense to inspect it. Only then did we find out that it was a 5 elements escape technique. Oh, to be more specific, it should be a commonly seen high-level escape technique in the hidden immortal continent called the water avoidance technique. This item is really rare. At least, I've never heard of it before. According to the person who inspected it, after practicing this escape technique, one can borrow the water of heaven and earth's spiritual energy to fly. It's even more powerful than us using the water avoidance technique to travel in the Jianghu. When the Taoist sect was flourishing, it must have been extremely precious. However, now that the Taoist sect has declined, according to that person, there isn't even a person who can use the elementary water escape technique. How could there be someone who needs this higher level escape technique? Even when Zhai Xinglu saw that this item was of little value and wanted to sell it to that person bitterly smiled and refused. Thus, Zhai Xinglu could only bring it here to bid. It's a bit strange. Although Xiaohua was excited, he had already calmed down. He pinched his chin and said curiously, "Why did this guy say such a secret so clearly? Isn't he afraid that no one will bid?" Haha. Fu Jiwen at the side laughed and said, "This is the 3rd time I've heard this. This whatever jade slip is the same as the amplifying thunderwood that I want. No one will bid for it. If not for it being more rare than the amplifying thunderwood and having a higher base price, this guy would have already taken it out when the bidding started." "What's the base price of this item?" Xiaohua hurriedly asked. "1 piece of top-grade primeval stone." Fu Jiwen was really familiar with it and said without hesitation. Xiaohua cursed loudly. "Damn it, this is indeed a rare item worth hoarding." This kind of broken jade slip is actually sold for one piece of top-grade primeval stone? Yes, this item is just like the golden core cultivation method. In some people's eyes, this item is trash. But in the eyes of others, this item is a peerless treasure. Zhai Xinglu fancied this point and would rather smash it in their hands than lower the price. The base price of this jade slip is 50 top-grade primeval stones. Without waiting for Fu Jiwen to finish speaking, Yu Linfeng cut the base price of the jade slip in half. Damn it, Fu Jiwen immediately jumped up. This young master has waited for this auction 3 times, and that amplifying thunder didn't even lower the price of a single primeval stone. How can this jade slip be lowered just like that? This is too unfair. -11. Chapter 3287. Hehe, it's not unfair. It's your bad character. Xiao Hua smiled and raised his hand. I bid 51 high-grade source stones. I fellow Xiao. Fu Jiwen hurriedly shouted. You bid too early. Others can see that you're determined to get it. That's right. Since I'm determined to get it, then I naturally have to let others know. Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked at the opposite side, where Duanmu young master was. 52 high-grade source stones. Sure enough, Duanmu young master's voice leisurely came. Xiao Hua confidently said, 53. Fu Jiwen naturally understood Xiao Hua's meaning. This Duanmu young master was probably the biggest obstacle to Xiao Hua bidding for this jade slip, or even the only obstacle. No matter when Xiao Hua opened his mouth, Duanmu young master would definitely return the favor from last time. Since that was the case, why didn't Xiao Hua open his mouth earlier? AI, what a pity. Fu Jiwen stomped his feet. Fellow Xiao, I'm afraid there are even better things later. You let him return it too early. Not early, not early. Xiao Hua also leisurely said, I've benefited a lot from this auction. This item will be the last item to bid. I won't be able to use any of the items in the future. Besides, even if there are more in the future, I'll just continue to bid. Who would be afraid of them? Sure enough, just as Xiao Hua thought, Duanmu young master only bid once and didn't say anything else. It seemed to be to return Xiao Hua's favor. And somewhere in Bright Moon Palace, Zhu Qing, who had been watching the entire auction with a sullen face, sighed again. AI, such a good favor. Why? Let it go so easily? Could it be that Xiao Hua really needs this jade slip? And his strength is so strong that he's not afraid of the Duanmu family? Okay, this senior bids 53 high-grade source stones. Yu Linfeng saw that the useless jade slip was finally sold as he wished, and couldn't help but be overjoyed. He clapped his hands and said, if no one bids, this item will be this senior's. 55 high-grade source stones. Just as Xiao Hua was about to call out Xiaoyi with a smile, another voice came from downstairs. Xiao Hua's face turned cold. Looking up, it was the person who bid for the golden core cultivation method. Are you crazy? Without waiting for Xiao Hua to open his mouth, Fu Jiwen scolded in sympathy. Fellow Taoist Xiao has already helped him bid for a gold core cultivation method. How can he repay kindness with enmity? Or perhaps, his identity as a cultivator of the Dao sect has already been exposed, so he can't add insult to injury. Young Master Fu, you're using the wrong words to make things worse. You should be trying to create new problems. Xiao Hua said coldly. Hehe, that's right, that's right. Fu Jiwen chuckled. After chatting with Xiao Hua for so long, Fu Jiwen felt like they were old friends at first sight. Unconsciously, he had already regarded Xiao Hua as an old friend. He won't be bidding again soon, Xiao Hua said indifferently. He raised his hand and said, 56 high-grade primordial stones. Immediately after, he muttered, could it be that this guy is blaming me for not helping him bid for the golden core cultivation method? Or do you think that I'm making fun of you? Humph, no matter what, you made me spend 2 high-grade primordial stones for nothing. Good. This fellow Taoist has increased the price. Fellow Taoist downstairs, are you going to increase the price? Yu Linfeng appeared excited again, as if every increase in price could excite him. Just as Yu Linfeng was anticipating the increase in price, below the balcony, the cultivator who had just bid screamed for no reason. and then resisted the urge to say anything else. Fellow Taoist Xiao? Fu Jiwen's eyes darted around, looking at Xiao Hua as he said in a low voice. He, using virtue to convince people. Using virtue to convince people. Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. I've always advocated using virtue to convince people. Fellow Taoist, are you going to increase the price? Yu Linfeng was rather surprised, but he didn't have any other thoughts. After all, the Bright Moon Palace was surrounded by many experts from Star Plucking Tower, and they weren't afraid of others causing trouble. Since no one shouted to stop, it couldn't have been done by that mysterious senior upstairs. The Taoist cultivator who instigated the internal strife naturally wouldn't bid, and even the meddlesome people in the surroundings didn't dare to make a sound. Young Master Duanmu was even more bewildered as he looked at the similarly illusory window in front of him, thinking about something unknown. Good. Yu Linfeng's anticipated climax didn't come, and he could only somewhat dejectedly point his finger, and the jade slip slowly flew towards Xiao Hua's window. Seeing the jade slip fly towards him, Xiao Hua had the urge to use heaven and earth in the sleeve, as if only by holding this item in his hand would his heart be at ease. Of course, Xiao Hua's current magic power wasn't enough to support heaven and earth in the sleeve, and the current Xiao Hua didn't seem to be as impetuous as he was back in the Dawn Rain continent. He only looked, indifferently looked, and his eyes didn't move from the jade slip at all, as if he already had a card up his sleeve, and wasn't afraid of anyone coming to snatch it from him. It was as if he was completely certain that even if this jade slip was snatched away by someone, he would still be able to take it back. Unknowingly, Xiao Hua, who seemed to be a young lad, had already begun to transform, whether it was his temperament or bearing. Perhaps it was because of time, or perhaps it was because of a great change. In short, at this moment, Xiao Hua, who hadn't recovered much magic power, and whose divine abilities weren't even 30% of his peak, actually had a confidence he never had before. Xiao Hua took the jade slip and said, "Should this old man hand over the origin stones to you now?" Xiao Yi answered and entered, then hastily waved her hand and said, reporting to Senior, "As long as there's a bid below a supreme-grade origin stone, Senior doesn't need to immediately hand over the origin stones. This is a kind of treatment for distinguished guests." "No need." Xiao Hua stretched out his hand, took out a supreme-grade origin stone, and handed it to Xiao Yi, saying, "This kind of treatment doesn't have any practical meaning. Senior, you'll soon know the treatment for distinguished guests." Xiao Yi took the origin stone, pursed her lips and smiled, then lowered her head and left. What kind of treatment do distinguished guests have? Xiao Hua used his divine sense to enter the jade slip, carefully probing it, and asked Fu Jiwen again. Fu Jiwen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He spread out his hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, I'm just joking. This is the first time I've entered a distinguished guest's room. How could I know the treatment for distinguished guests?" However, after thinking for a moment, he probed again. If it's the most obvious treatment, it might be when bidding for the last few treasures. After a certain price, the cultivators downstairs aren't allowed to bid. They're probably afraid that they can't afford the origin stones, so they're blindly shouting there. And Xiao Hua answered indifferently. Fu Jiwen couldn't clearly see Xiao Hua's appearance in the stardust, but he also understood that Xiao Hua was probing the water escape technique. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, Xiao Hua put the jade slip into the space and handed it over to the green-robed Xiao Hua to comprehend. At this moment, Xiao Hua was really happy. Although this water escape technique wasn't a high-grade water escape technique like Yu Linfeng said, it was still a mid-grade water escape technique. After fusing with the water, it was an escape technique that relied on the water energy of heaven and earth to fly. In other words, as long as it was a place with water energy of heaven and earth, one could use this escape technique to fly. It wasn't like before where there was real water to be able to escape. As for the water avoidance technique from the West Sea, Xiao Hua had already finished comprehending it with the Buddha's Saraira. That technique was very strange and required the so-called origin energy to be used. However, Xiao Hua didn't know what origin energy was, so he couldn't test it out. Xiao Hua closed his eyes for a moment and pondered a little. He knew that although these two water escape techniques weren't of the same origin, The realms of the escape techniques were connected. If he finished cultivating the water avoidance technique, he could naturally continue to cultivate the mid-grade water escape technique. Oh, right. Isn't there someone in front of us who knows about origin energy? It's a waste not to ask. Xiaohua glanced at Fu Jiwen, who was also silently looking at the auction, and came to a realization. He hurriedly smiled and said, "Young Master Fu, I still have a question to ask. Fellow Taoist Xiao, why are you so polite? Please ask." Fu Jiwen hurriedly moved his gaze away from the window and said with a smile. Xiaohua said, "I would like to ask, what is origin energy? Is it the magic power of Confucian cultivators?" "Yes," Fu Jiwen said curiously, "Taoism is magic power. Buddhism is psychokinesis. Confucian cultivators are naturally origin energy. But why do some demons' cultivation techniques also mention origin energy?" Xiaohua asked curiously. "This is what I don't understand." "Oh, I understand," Fu Jiwen said with a smile. "Does fellow Taoist know about the 9 grades of origin energy and the 27th rank?" "I naturally know about this." Xiaohua nodded. "Then it's easy to explain," Fu Jiwen explained, "because the 3 continents have magic power, psychokinesis, and origin energy." "Oh, I'm not very clear about the 1,000 demons sacred realm. This kind of classification is too heterogeneous. However, some cultivation techniques can be used regardless of magic power, psychokinesis, or origin energy. Therefore, Confucian cultivators use origin energy to refer to all magic power, psychokinesis, and origin energy." "So it's like that." Xiaohua nodded and said, "These Confucian cultivators are really tyrannical. Origin energy is 9 grades. The substitution of origin energy is convenient for them. It can't be helped." "Who asked the hidden immortal continent to have the most Confucian cultivators?" Fu Jiwen smiled, then pointed outside the window and said, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, didn't you just say that you want to look for flying equipment? Now they have already started to bid for flying demonic beasts. Why don't you take a look?" "Okay," Xiaohua responded and looked outside the window. However, he was ecstatic in his heart. Since magic power can be used as origin energy, then when his magic power is fully recovered, he can naturally use the water escape technique. In other words, he can already use the complete 5 elements escape technique. His light escape technique cultivation has indeed taken a solid step. At this moment, in front of you Linfeng, there is a row of over 10 eggs of different sizes, which are also emitting different kinds of bewitching brilliance. The shape of these eggs is as strange as the halo. Some are oval, some are flat, some are gourd-shaped, and there are even some that are long. There are even some eggs that are faintly flickering, as if these eggs are lightly breathing. "These are demonic beast eggs?" Xiaohua squinted his eyes and asked Fu Jiwen in a low voice. -11. Chapter 3288. Without waiting for Fu Jiwen to answer, Yu Linfeng unfolded his fan and pretended to wave it a few times. He smiled and said, "What fellow immortals are looking at is naturally the eggs of the extremely precious birds and beasts of the 1,000 demons sacred realm. Everyone knows that the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent can't be compared to the demons of the 1,000 demons sacred realm. They can't rely on their physical bodies to fly long distances. They can only rely on flying tools and birds. Generally, flying tools requires primeval stones and primeval energy. Sometimes, it also consumes divine sense. Birds for transportation don't need to be so troublesome. As long as you communicate with them, you don't need to think too much. You can sleep and be taken away by the birds. What's more, a well-trained bird is a great help to us. They can also help you kill any evil cultivators you encounter. And these birds and flying beasts are best raised from young. Sign a blood contract with them before they hatch. If you erase the blood contract with the birds and flying beasts, then sign a new one. The bird's spirituality will disappear a lot. The eggs of the birds and flying beasts in front of me are all from the 1,000 demons sacred realm. They weren't raised in captivity by the hidden immortal continent. Therefore, you don't need to worry about the spirituality of these birds and flying beasts after they hatch. Of course, if any fellow immortal is unlucky and can't hatch the eggs, or if the hatched demonic beast doesn't have spirituality, my Zhai Xing Lu won't take responsibility. Ha ha ha. Yu Linfeng teased a few words. He flung his fan and said, "The first egg is a cloud crane egg. The starting price is 5 high-grade primeval stones. 6, 10. Following Yu Linfeng's words, the entire auction hall became lively again. After all, these flying beasts were commonly used. Many people came here for these eggs. How could they be patient? They hurriedly bid. That fellow Taoist Xiao. Fu Jiwen stole a glance at Xiao Hua. Seeing that he didn't do anything, he said with a smile, "I want a bid for a wood-attributed green crane. I hope fellow Taoist Xiao can help me." Xiao Hua smiled and said, "No problem, you can bid as much as you want. It's not what fellow Taoist Xiao thinks." Fu Jiwen said with some shame, "Dao friend helped me bid for the thunder amplification wood, so I should have given all these high-grade primeval stones to Dao friend. However, I have been thinking that these upper-grade primordial stones are not enough to compensate fellow Taoist. I don't know how I can compensate or repay fellow Taoist. But now, I'm not paying attention to fellow Taoist's gift, and I'm bidding for the birds instead." "All right." Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand. "There's no need to mention this again. Just now, young Master Fu gave me a lot of pointers, and that's more than enough to repay him. Young Master Fu, you can bid as much as you want. There's no need to think too much about it." "All right." Fu Jiwen sighed. "Actually, the reason why I bid for the green crane is because I want to wait for my wife to escape and take her to travel the world." "Escape?" Xiao Hua raised his eyebrows, thinking that he had misheard, but Fu Jiwen seemed to have blurted it out. His face was a little embarrassed, and he immediately looked out the window, not saying another word. Since Fu Jiwen didn't say anything, Xiao Hua naturally wouldn't ask anymore. Soon, the price of the cloud crane egg reached 23 high-grade primordial stones, and it was bought by a cultivator downstairs. Following that, the fire snake, blue luan, cloud howl, chick e, shihong, and other bird beasts were all bought by 20 or so high-grade primordial stones. Unfortunately, these bird beasts were not of the wood attribute. Fu Jiwen didn't say anything. Fu Jiwen, who always looked calm, was actually a little anxious. He stood in front of the windowsill and looked at the decreasing number of beast eggs. Fortunately, when the third last beast egg was auctioned, it was the wood attribute cloud crane that Fu Jiwen wanted, and he almost couldn't wait to bid. His bid didn't matter, but everyone was a little hesitant. After all, everyone had seen the bid for the water escape technique. Who would dare to compete with a virtuous senior? After a slight awkward silence, this cloud crane was actually bought by Fu Jiwen for 10 or so high-grade primordial stones. But at this critical moment, young Master Duanmu started to bid again. Moreover, he increased the price by 5 high-grade primordial stones twice, and still raised the price of this cloud crane to the height of 25 high-grade primordial stones. "Humph!" Xiao Hua sneered, and said in a low voice, "This is young Master Duanmu telling me that this is the last time he will be lenient. From now on, the bridge will be the bridge, and the road will be the road. He won't let go again. The conflict from before. Hee, I'm afraid it can't be revealed." "Did I ruin fellow Taoist's matter?" Fu Jiwen hurriedly said. He really didn't think that much. "How about I give it to young Master Duanmu?" "How is that possible? Doing this is adding fuel to the fire." Xiao Hua shook his head. "Don't be afraid of him. This has nothing to do with you. 26 high-grade primordial stones. I want to see, what will young Master Duanmu look like after he loses his mask?" After Xiao Hua spoke, the entire auction house was silent. No one bid anymore, and the green crane egg flew to the window. Fu Jiwen took the green crane egg and carefully put it into the small chinkuan bag. Looking at Fu Jiwen's relieved expression, Xiao Hua suddenly asked curiously, "Young Master Fu, this small chinkuan bag can store living things?" "Of course." Fu Jiwen didn't find Xiao Hua's ignorance strange at all, and said with a smile, Chinkuan means to form a universe of its own. Of course it can store living things. But no matter if it's the small chinkuan bag, the chinkuan bag, or even the chinkuan bangles, they can't store living things for long periods of time. After a certain period of time, the living things have to come out for air. In the following few bids, other than the remaining beast eggs, there were even a dozen young beasts. Although Xiaohua hadn't seen these young beasts before, he wasn't interested in them. He had a lot of strange things in his space, and every one of them was more powerful than these young beasts. He wouldn't spend primordial stones for no reason. After the time it took to eat a meal, Yu Linfeng finally finished processing the young beasts. Then, he looked at the last golden ball of light on the outline of the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, took a deep breath, and said loudly, "Fellow immortals, you should all know that every time my Bright Moon Palace bids for rare items, we leave the 3 most valuable items behind. The next item to bid is one of them." Swoosh. Once Yu Linfeng said this, everyone held their breaths and looked at the golden ball of light with rapt attention. They didn't even want to breathe loudly and quietly listen to Yu Linfeng's analysis. They really wanted to know what it was. This item. Yu Linfeng didn't even take the item and said, "This item is only for the VIPs on the 3rd floor. As for the other immortals, I'm sorry, you don't have the qualifications to bid." Fellow immortal Yu. Just as Yu Linfeng finished speaking, someone naturally wasn't convinced. He jumped up and said, "I know the rules of star-picking tower very well. When the price of a rare item is set, only the VIPs on the 3rd floor are qualified to bid. But this item hasn't even revealed its base price yet, so we're not allowed to bid? Could it be this item's base price has already exceeded?" At this point, the cultivator seemed to have understood something and couldn't close his mouth. This was the first time he heard that the Bright Moon Palace bid for an item with a base price of more than 10 top-grade source stones. AI, it's not just the base price. Yu Linfeng waved his hand and sighed. Even if you have enough source stones to bid, you still have to consider whether you have the strength to protect this item, whether you have the life to protect this item. SII. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air. With a wave of Yu Linfeng's hand, the golden light slowly flew closer. The golden light was blazing. Although it hadn't revealed its true appearance, the indescribable heat was like the scorching sun, and it already made everyone in the Bright Moon Palace feel anxious and thirsty. A feeling of difficulty arose in everyone's hearts. Unconsciously, everyone slightly narrowed their eyes, but the desire in their eyes was even more intense than the scorching sun. They stared fixedly at the light, wanting to know just how rare this item was. When the light landed in front of Yu Linfeng, it was actually dozens of feet wide. It was clear that Yu Linfeng didn't dare to approach the light and had already flown to the top of the Bright Moon Palace. At the same time, wisps of blue mist emerged from all over the Bright Moon Palace like clouds, enveloping everyone in front of it and blocking the heat. Rise. Yu Linfeng clapped his hands, and a rare imperial artifact that looked like an ink brush came out of his sleeves. He let out a roar like spring thunder and reached out his hand. The brush was about to throw towards the golden light. Wait! Just at this moment, an extremely loud and clear voice that was even more shocking than muffled thunder came from the windowsill on Xiaohua's left. SII. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua's mind was shaken by this voice. Xiaohua couldn't help sucking in a breath of cold air and looked to his left in disbelief. This window, it seems like there hasn't been a bid. There hasn't even been a sound, right? It seems like their goal is this golden item. When Yu Linfeng heard this voice, his body naturally trembled, and the ink brush remained in his hand. However, Yu Linfeng's face didn't reveal the slightest bit of displeasure. He cupped his hands and said, "Senior upstairs, may I say something? There's no need to open this item." That voice was very imposing, and in people's ears, it seemed to resonate in their hearts. There was an inconceivable power that made people submit from the bottom of their hearts. Yes, this little one understands. Yu Linfeng actually agreed and withdrew his hand, putting the ink brush back into his sleeve. Cough, cough. A clear coughing sound appeared at this time, and a ball of green light floated from the night sky of the Bright Moon Palace. Within the light, Zhu Qing had already changed into green clothes and slowly flew down like a student rushing to take the exam. When Yu Linfeng saw Zhu Qing, he immediately sweated profusely. His usually calm expression was replaced with panic, and he hastily bowed and said, "Tower Lord, this subordinate, you can go down." Zhu Qing didn't talk to Yu Linfeng as warmly as she talked to Xiaohua. Just a few words made Yu Linfeng feel a chill in his heart. He didn't dare to ask anything, and hastily floated down from the sky. However, he still didn't dare to approach the golden light, and followed the edge of the bright moon palace to stand in the shadows. -11. Chapter 3289. Phew. Everyone let out a long breath. The feeling of being suppressed by the dragon's might was really terrible. It was like the struggle of a drowning person before death. That kind of suffocation, that kind of helplessness, that kind of insignificance, was something that these people would probably never forget in their entire lives. Hee, this is good. What do you think? Another arrogant voice shouted. Do you think you can profane the dragon's remains? You can't even resist this dragon aura, yet you still dare to make a big fuss about it. Do you think the likes of you have the right to see it? Go. Zhu Qing's face regained some color. She waved her hand, and the ink brush landed in her hand. Then she pushed her hand, and the dragon bone flew far away. It turned into a golden moon and hung in the night sky of the bright moon palace. Seniors. Zhu Qing bowed again, speaking softly. My star-picking tower has some unspeakable difficulties in bidding for this item in Bright Moon Palace. This matter was done in haste. You can see that I didn't even prepare an imperial item to block the dragon aura. You can see, I was caught unprepared. Of course, there are some things that senior blames me too early. I, Zhai Xinglu, know very well what this dragon bone is. In front of the thousands of fellow immortals from the Bright Moon Palace, I can swear that I, Zhai Xinglu, have already sent people to contact Senior. It was only after we did not receive any news from Senior that we decided to bid for this dragon bone when the Bronze Pillar country was at war with other countries. As for how Senior got the news and rushed here, I don't know the reason. I wanted to explain it to Senior face to face, but Senior seems to have misunderstood. I can only explain it here. And that faint voice spoke, unknown if it meant it heard or understood. In short, when Zhu Qing heard this voice, he became spirited again and said, however, since the bidding has already begun, I would like to invite the seniors to make their own bids. This dragon bone, especially because of the dragon horn, this item is already priceless. I do not dare to profane the dragon bone, so I would like to invite the seniors to make their own bids. Zhu Qing's words were very clear, and Xiaohua also understood. Not only did this dragon bone have some problems with its origin, but the bidding process was also very complicated. Zhai Xinglu had already known the importance of the dragon bone before the auction. He would definitely have contacted the East Sea Dragon Palace. Unfortunately, for some reason, there was no reply. Furthermore, the Bronze Pillar country was at war. Zhai Xinglu was afraid that there would be problems with the dragon bone. He was anxious to get rid of this hot potato, so he hurriedly sent the dragon bone to the auction. But what was surprising was that before the auction, someone from the East Sea Dragon Palace actually came. What's more, the person who came was very aggressive. They did not receive the message from Zhai Xinglu, but got the message from someone else. They were here to denounce Zhu Qing, so they did not listen to her explanation at all. As for Zhu Qing, it was even more difficult for her to dismount. After all, ordinary cultivators wouldn't know what items would be auctioned in this auction, but people like young Master Duanmu would definitely know. Perhaps, the item that young Master Duanmu had mentioned earlier might really be this. For this, he was willing to sacrifice 3 supreme-grade primal stones. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for Zhu Qing to give the dragon bone to someone from the East Sea Dragon Palace for free. The only way was to bid. Poor child. Xiaohua looked at Zhu Qing sympathetically and thought, it seems that everything is not easy. I'll bid. Although no name was mentioned, everyone already knew that the person who bid first was from the East Sea Dragon Palace. At this time, someone in the room said, no matter how many primal stones others bid, my East will have 1 supreme-grade primal stone more than them. Hee. Before the person from the East Sea Dragon Palace finished speaking, the voice that was a little leaky laughed shrilly and said, I know that your East Sea Dragon Palace has countless treasures, but it's not only your East Sea Dragon Palace that has treasures in this world. I have 10 supreme-grade primal stones, more than the East Sea Dragon Palace. Then, All the other forces entered the auction and started bidding. On the balcony, Xiaohua squinted his eyes and looked at the golden moon. He secretly pondered whether or not he should bid. Just now, the dragon might above the dragon horn was really terrifying. If it could be used on a magic weapon, it would absolutely be a sharp weapon to kill people. Oh, I forgot about it. Xiaohua suddenly patted his forehead and woke up. Damn it, it doesn't matter if I want it or not. Isn't Little White lacking this thing? If Little White needs it, I'll buy it regardless of the East Sea Dragon Palace. Thinking, Xiaohua's mind immediately turned into a jade archive. Xiaohua appeared in front of the mysterious dark cloud. This mysterious dark cloud seems to have some changes. Because he had learned from the bone that ordinary people couldn't see souls, Xiaohua paid special attention to this mysterious dark cloud. However, when he saw the heavenly marks and earth deeds on it, Xiaohua couldn't help but stare blankly. Previously, although there were heavenly marks and earth deeds outside the mysterious dark cloud, these mysterious natural objects were faintly discernible and simply couldn't be seen clearly. But now, these heavenly might could be clearly seen, as if they were carved outside the mysterious dark cloud. Moreover, there were strands of green shadows entangling the heavenly might. Those heavenly marks and earth deeds were already like a tight armor wrapping around the mysterious dark clouds, and these green shadows gave off a green glow outside the armor, adding another layer of protection. Moreover, within the heavenly marks and earth deeds, there were some faint lightning and broken threads. Even Xiaohua, who was in the Jade Archive, felt a burst of dizziness when he looked at these broken threads. Suddenly, a scene of 5 thunderbolts roaring appeared in front of his eyes. I'm afraid that the 9th heaven of spirit origin has made new progress. Xiaohua was overjoyed. His figure hid in the dark cloud. The moment Xiaohua's figure disappeared into the dark cloud, millions of lightning and broken threads were born from the dark cloud. However, as soon as Xiaohua touched Xiaohua's figure, his figure disappeared without a trace. Haha, Xiaohua, you're here? When Jade Archive Xiaohua's figure appeared in the sky, the little white dragon immediately sensed it. The huge dragon head poked out from the top of the sky and called out with a smile. Xiaohua glanced at Xiaohua. At this time, the sky was incomparably spacious. Many green seal characters fluttered in the sky as if they were alive. Xiaohua's incomparably huge dragon body was already entrenched at the junction between the sky and the sky, covering the entire horizon. Those countless dark green soul strands were like seaweed in the sea, entwining the dragon body. When the soul strands danced, the dragon body also danced. Countless dark green splendors were like fireflies that filled the sky. The soul cultivator Xiaohua also transformed into a 100-zhang-tall giant. His whole body was not surrounded by the soul strands. His body was everywhere. I'm here, Xiaohua said indifferently. He looked at the soul cultivator Xiaohua, who ignored him and saluted. Fellow Taoist, you've worked hard. Buzz buzz. Countless green seal characters rushed out from the sea of soul strands. The soul cultivator Xiaohua's figure slowly shrank, turning into the same appearance as Xiaohua. He also cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist, I have a bone here and a soul treasure called the Soul Bridge. I don't know if I can give it to fellow Taoist to cultivate? Xiaohua asked with a smile. Xiaohua didn't smile. He only said indifferently, Fellow Taoist, please give it to me. Comprehending the bone and refining the soul treasure is my duty. Previously, my cultivation was insufficient and I couldn't control the 9th heaven of spirit origin. Now, with Xiao Bai's help, I can barely do it. Good. Xiaohua laughed. The bone and soul treasure were comprehended by him, and even the soul treasure was refined by him. Now that he had the help of Xiaohua, wouldn't he be able to save himself some trouble? Fellow Taoist, please take a look. With a wave of his hand, the Jade Archive Xiaohua pulled the bone out of space and handed it to the soul cultivator Xiaohua. The soul cultivator Xiaohua didn't even bother to look at it. Instead, he opened his mouth, and several soul strands shot out like tentacles and swallowed the bone. Xiaohua looked at this action with a dumbfounded expression. He smiled bitterly and said, Fellow Taoist, we are of the same origin. Can you be a bit more refined? Otherwise, Don't say you know I in front of Xiao Bai. Xiao Hua responded indifferently. Obviously, he didn't take this to heart. Xiao Hua waved his hand again and said, "This is another bone. There is a green seal character recorded in it. I haven't comprehended it yet, so I'll give it to you." Xiao Hua opened his mouth again. Xiao Hua hurriedly withdrew his hand, and the bone disappeared into thin air. "Give it to me." Xiao Hua stretched out his hand and asked Xiao Hua for it. "Pay attention to your manners." Xiao Hua put the bone in Xiao Hua's hand. The soul cultivator, Xiao Hua, took the bone and slowly placed it in front of his forehead, pressing it against his forehead. "Good, that's how it should be." Jade Archive Xiao Hua praised with satisfaction. Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, Xiao Hua slapped his hand down, causing a ripple to appear on his forehead. Then, his knuckles sank back in. Xiao Hua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only say helplessly, "Fortunately, this can be considered as some progress." "What about the soul treasure? Let me see it," Xiao Hua asked again. It seemed that he was very bored in the 9 heavens of spirit origin, and these bones and soul treasures were good things for him to pass the time. "Fellow Taoist, are you sure there is no problem?" Xiao Hua still didn't dare to send the soul bridge that hadn't been refined into the mysterious dark clouds, and asked tentatively. Xiao Hua said indifferently, "Fellow Taoist, if you want to take it, then take it. If you don't want to take it, then slowly refine it." "Okay." Xiao Hua waved his hand, wanting to drag the bone ball to the endless sky. Unfortunately, beyond his expectations, he didn't see the bone ball appear even after waving his hand a few times.
How strange.
Jade Archive Xiao Hua looked outside the dark clouds thoughtfully and said with a faint smile, "Let's go take a look." Xiao Hua turned into a green light and rushed out of the endless sky. Xiao Hua naturally followed him out of the mysterious dark clouds. Outside the dark clouds, the bone ball was stuck to the surface of the mysterious dark clouds and rotating at an extremely fast speed. The bone particles had long disappeared, leaving only layers of white flashing light. As for the mysterious dark clouds, where the bone ball touched, the heaven pattern earth deed was emitting a faint green light, blocking the bone ball. Moreover, where the bone ball touched, the thousands of lightning threads and broken fireflies also gathered to block the bone ball. -11. Chapter 3290. This thing is a genuine soul item. According to the bone, it can change the shape of the soul bridge according to the soul of different people. It matches the heavenly pattern and earth deed of the soul. Only then can it enter the soul of another person. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua said indifferently after taking a glance at it. "It seems I can only refine it myself." Jade Archive Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. "Really? You're underestimating me too much." Soul cultivator Xiao Hua waved his hand and the bone ball fell into his hand. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of green gas that covered the bone ball. The bone ball flew into the air and entered Xiao Hua's mouth along with the green gas. Then, soul cultivator Xiao Hua rushed into the mysterious cloud, but the heavenly pattern and earth deed didn't react at all. "Good," Jade Archive Xiao Hua clapped his hands. "That's the way to do it. That's the style of an expert." Jade Archive Xiao Hua once again flew into the mysterious dark clouds. At this time, soul cultivator Xiao Hua had already hidden himself within the soul strands. He knew that Jade Archive Xiao Hua would no longer look for him. He didn't know if Jade Archive Xiao Hua was cultivating the 9 heavens spirit origin or refining his soul bridge. "Fellow Taoist, my cultivation has yet to recover. Looking at the situation outside, I'm afraid I'll have to compete with others. Only then can I have a good ending. I wonder if fellow Taoist can lend me a hand?" Jade Archive Xiao Hua raised his head and laughed. "You want me to go out?" Soul cultivator Xiao Hua didn't show himself. Instead, he spoke with a thunderous voice and thousands of green seal characters overflowed in the sky. "Yes, that's exactly what I was thinking." Jade Archive Xiao Hua frowned and had a bad feeling in his heart. "Do you think I can go out?" Soul cultivator Xiao Hua said indifferently, "I'm just a strand of your soul. Without another body, I'll turn into dust as soon as I go out."
But
Jade Archive Xiao Hua thought of the soul inside the flying sword and was about to ask. Soul cultivator Xiao Hua naturally knew what he was thinking and immediately said, "The soul on the flying sword is the carrier of the flying sword. Naturally, it can go out alone. Or perhaps, when your physical body perishes, our primordial spirits will be able to leave. As for now, it's absolutely impossible." External incarnation technique. Jade Archive Xiao Hua suddenly thought of the body extension technique mentioned by the 10,000 Demon Realm Empress. That's right. Once you have successfully cultivated an avatar, perhaps all of us will be able to lend you a hand. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua replied, "Actually, you should know all of this, but you? Forget it, let's not talk about it. Having too many primordial divinities isn't necessarily a good thing for you." As Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's voice disappeared, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's face turned awkward. Yes, as long as the Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua knew, the Jade Archive Xiao Hua should also know. But there was only one Jade Archive Xiao Hua. What green-robed Xiao Hua? What Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua? What karmic Xiao Hua? There were simply too many. There was no way he could learn all of these primordial divinities at once. He could only slowly assimilate and digest them. Forget it. Jade Archive Xiao Hua sighed as he thought of the important matter. He hurriedly called Little White over and told it about the dragon bones in the auction house. Then, he asked, "Little White, your soul is already full. Aren't you just waiting for this body?" "Hee, many thanks, Xiao Hua." Whitey laughed loudly, its dragon roar echoing through the entire sky. "What I want is a complete body. Not only do I want the dragon bones, but I also want the blood essence. These incomplete dragon bones. According to what you said, only the dragon horns are of some use. I can't use them." Jade Archive Xiao Hua nodded and said, "How do you say? I can only rely on my luck in the future. Let's leave it to fate. Anyway, I'm not in a hurry to go out." Little White didn't seem to mind, and then said somewhat apologetically, "It's a pity that my memories are now very fragmented. I don't know what many of them are, so I can't give you any pointers in your cultivation. I'm really sorry." "Hee, this is nothing." Jade Archive Xiao Hua laughed. "You and I share weal and woe together. There's no need to mention these empty courtesies." Little White's huge dragon head nodded up and down, and then said with some hesitation, "With your cultivation level, I can just touch the layer of seal in your soul, but this seal is a bit strange. As for how strange it is, I'll have to enter it first." Hearing this, Jade Archive Xiao Hua's heart settled and said, "Oh right, Little White, can you see my nine-heaven spirit?" "See?" Little White didn't seem to understand. After thinking for a moment, it asked, "Are you talking about the surroundings?" "Yes." Jade Archive Xiao Hua's heart jumped and nodded. "I can? So many soul strands, so many green lines. How can I not see it?" Little White answered straightforwardly. Jade Archive Xiao Hua shook his head slightly. "What I mean is, when you enter here, can you see the shape of this place?" "I understand. You're talking about the appearance of this soul." Little White suddenly realized. "That's right. Of course I can't see it." Little White laughed. "Otherwise, why would I struggle with all my might when you dragged me in?" "Ah, you can't see it?" Jade Archive Xiao Hua was a little surprised. "But why can I see your appearance? And you can even cultivate layer by layer?" "Xiao Hua, you have to understand. Being able to see and being able to sense are two different things." Little White explained. "Moreover, the soul is fused with the body and is protected by the body. Others can't see it. A soul that has left the body can be called a soul and is no longer a soul. Perhaps it can be seen by others. Of course, even if it is the soul of the body, if there is a powerful secret technique that can surpass the protection of the body to the soul, perhaps it can be seen." Speaking to here, Little White apologized again. "These are just some of my incomplete memories. I don't know if they are correct. It can be considered as a reference. That is to say, if there is a soul sword piercing from the outside." Jade Archive Xiao Hua had a trace of understanding. This is just based on feeling. In fact, no matter what, their soul sword can't see the appearance of the soul. "Yes, that should be the case." Little White nodded. "The soul is the most mysterious place in the body. How can it be exposed there? Then, you may not be able to see the layer of seal in my soul, and just by sensing it, the seal may be visible, but what is under the seal? I can only sense it, but not see it. Little White laughed. Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned and said, then you can slowly break the seal. I'll have to trouble you. You're welcome. Little White knew that Jade Archive Xiaohua was about to leave, and the huge dragon head retracted into the sea of soul strands. Jade Archive Xiaohua looked around. The sky was full of flickering lights and sighed. Alas, if this is a soul cultivator, it's really strange. But what's even stranger is this Zhao's Dharma eye. After speaking, Jade Archive Xiaohua retreated from the mysterious dark clouds. However, when his primordial spirit returned, he was shocked again when he looked at the auction field. He saw that the auction field, which was very lively just a moment ago, was now completely silent. Even Zhu Qing was silently standing in the air with her lips tightly shut. Although there was a trace of a smile on her face, there was a trace of strangeness in her eyes.
Strange.
Xiaohua was puzzled. It was only a moment. What happened? However, the bright moon, which was as bright as the sun, was still hanging there. Obviously, the bidding for the dragon bones was not over yet. Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and was about to ask Fu Jiwen when he suddenly saw Zhu Qing's somewhat helpless expression. He came to a realization. Damn it. This is the voice transmission of the people from the Dragon Palace, young Master Duanmu, and a few cultivators who have the strength to bid for the dragon bones. Thinking of this, Xiaohua laughed in his heart. In this world, there is nothing that can't be compromised. As long as there are enough benefits, everything can be exchanged. A set of dragon bones can be measured with top-grade primordial stones, and a promise can also be measured with top-grade primordial stones. These people, just now, were all very aggressive. One wanted to add 1 top-grade primordial stone more than the others, and another wanted to add 10 top-grade primordial stones more than everyone else, as if the dragon bones were something that must be obtained. But in fact, only the East Sea Dragon Palace had the intention to obtain it. The others were just looting a burning house, wanting to gain benefits from it. It seems that I should have bid just now. Maybe I can even get a high-level water escape technique. Strange. Just when Xiaohua was thinking whether it was too late to bid now, Fu Jiwen whispered, this has been discussed for a long time. Why hasn't the result come out yet? Could it be that, besides the East Sea Dragon Palace, there is someone who urgently needs this thing? Ha ha ha. For a moment, Xiaohua was dumbfounded. Xiaohua was definitely not the only smart person in this world. Although Fu Jiwen's cultivation was ordinary, he obviously understood the strangeness of it. What does young Master Fu think? Besides the East Sea Dragon Palace, who else needs this dragon bone? Xiaohua naturally did not know, so he could only ask in order to advance and retreat. Fu Jiwen looked out of the window at the slightly strange third floor and whispered, this dragon bone may be an excellent material for refining weapons in the eyes of Taoist cultivators. In the eyes of Buddhists, it is also a material for refining Buddhist weapons. In the eyes of the East Sea Dragon Palace, it is the remains of a senior to be revered and collected. But in the eyes of Confucian cultivators, the most important thing is the fate of the royal family. What? The fate of the royal family? This dragon bone has something to do with fate? That's right. Fu Jiwen nodded. The fate of the royal family is related to the amount of imperial qi of the royal family descendants, and the dragon aura on the dragon bone, especially the dragon horn, can be transformed into imperial qi with the help of Confucian cultivators' secret techniques. Xiaohua understood and glanced at the third floor's windowsill. There must be a royal family of the Bronze Pillar country on the third floor. Also, Zhai Xinglu is eagerly bidding for this dragon bone, probably because they are afraid of attracting the attention of the royal families of various countries, especially the royal family of the Bronze Pillar country. There is definitely no royal family of the Bronze Pillar country here, Fu Jiwen said decisively. There can only be the royal family of another country, and the king of the Bronze Pillar country is definitely not in the country. The regent should be the crown prince, and the relationship between the crown prince and Zhai Xinglu is ordinary. -11.